Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Laura Conley. On March 15, 1978, in the United States, a girl named Laura was born. She was the third child of Carlene and James. Laura is very close to her sisters, and her parents always love and care for their children with all their heart. However, everything changed when Carlene and James divorced. At that time, Laura was still a teenager, and her parents' divorce affected her very much. During her difficult times, she turned to alcohol and then became addicted to psychotropic substances. Her mother, Carlene, believed these issues stemmed from the divorce and blamed herself for her struggles. Carlene was born on June 13, 1945, in Virginia. Her three daughters are always her number one priority, and she feels responsible for everything that happens to them. She feels guilty because her divorce has affected Laura, her youngest daughter. This guilt causes she to seek to justify Laura's actions. As a mother, she was always supportive and tried to help Laura through her challenges. However, other family members and acquaintances often found Laura irritable and always wanting attention. Even though 20 years have passed since Laura's parents divorced, when her two older sisters were married and living on their own, she continued to live in the family home. She was unemployed and continued to demand attention from her mother, Carlene. At one point, Laura has a boyfriend, and he moves in with her and her mother, Carlene. Laura believed she was mentally ill and repeatedly sought medical help to be prescribed psychotropic medication. Eventually, medical professionals stopped prescribing these medications to her. Because of craving for psychotropic drugs, she begins sneaking into neighbors' houses to steal any pills she can find. She also took advantage of her mother's kindness, repeatedly calling her mother at work and bothering her for various reasons. This eventually forced her mother to quit her job. In 2008, Laura was convicted of a minor shoplifting offense, but was quickly released after her mother, Carlene, posted bail for her. Unfortunately, the situation only worsened. At first she just scolded her mother, but gradually she started abusing her mother. Despite being hurt, but Carlene did not want to report her daughter to the authorities or have her thrown out of the house. On one occasion, after a violent incident, specialists were called to assess Laura's mental health. Even then, Carlene allowed Laura to return home, believing it was her duty as a mother to care for her. Laura's anger is not only directed at her mother but also at her boyfriend, Chris Lewin. She was taken to court twice for attacking him. One incident occurred in late October 2014, when she woke him from his sleep and accused him of cheating. Their argument quickly turned into violence. During the scuffle, she bit him and used a kitchen knife, causing a minor wound to his arm. This incident resulted in Laura being charged with a misdemeanor and she having to attend anger management therapy. Even though she was over 35 years old at that time, her behavior remained unchanged. A few months later, on January 7, 2015, Laura was arrested again. This time, she bit Chris's finger when he tried to stop her from attacking Carlene. He cannot understand why she resents her mother, Carlene, so much. Carlene always wholeheartedly took care of her three daughters and 5 grandchildren, whom she cherished deeply. Carlene tried her best to take care of Laura, providing everything she thought could help Laura overcome her problems. Sadly, despite Carlene's unconditional love and good intentions, Laura's cruel actions towards her were not stopped. On March 14, 2015, Laura called 911 to report an incident at her mother Carlene's home. She told the operator that there had been a home invasion and that her mother had been fatally shot. Officers from the Independence, Taylor Mill, and Covington police departments quickly arrived at the scene and were met with a gruesome sight. Laura was covered in blood. And Carlene, a 69-year-old woman, was lying on the kitchen counter, barely alive and suffering from multiple stab wounds. When police questioned Laura about what had happened, she claimed she couldn't remember, saying she had lost consciousness. However, she mentioned that, 2 hours earlier, a group of people knocked on the door asking for candy, a common occurrence during Halloween, despite Halloween being months away. She gave police various descriptions of the suspects, prompting authorities to launch a search. Police set up a cordon in the area, but no one matching Lara's descriptions was found. To further investigate, the police brought Laura to the station for questioning. During the interrogation, she shared additional details about the assailants, but also introduced inconsistencies. For example, she believes she was targeted because she has not paid the drug dealers. She later gave contradictory accounts of how she discovered Carlene's body. She initially said that when she got home, she found Carlene dead. She later said she slept in the basement, and after waking up and going upstairs, she saw Carlene's body lying on the kitchen floor. Hours after the investigation began, detectives Mike Richmond and Jim Moore from the Independence Police Department quickly identified Laura as being involved in the case. It became clear that she had lied to the police about what happened. Evidence showed that there was no break-in, and no fingerprints were found on the doors or windows. This led investigators to conclude that Laura was the only person in the house when her mother, Carlene, was murdered. Early on the morning of Sunday, March 15th, Lara's 37th birthday, authorities arrested her for the murder of Carlene. The following day, Monday, March 16th, Laura appeared in court via video link. She asserted that she was not guilty. However, she was detained without bail and sent to county jail, facing charges of murder and domestic violence. The court also prohibited her from having any contact with her boyfriend, Chris. Prosecutor Rob Sanders said Carlene's murder had come as a huge shock to local residents, as their area was known for its safety and low crime rates. He stressed that the case was still under investigation and admitted that it was still unclear what had happened. He also said that the reason why Laura committed such a serious crime would soon be clarified. The forensic report revealed the brutal nature of the attack. An autopsy showed that Carlene had been stabbed 77 times. She also had 27 defensive wounds and 2 bite marks. On March 24th, Laura appeared before a judge. She explained that she had no money, making her unable to afford a lawyer. In response, the judge assigned her a public defender and proceeded with the hearing. During the court proceedings, Detective Michael Richmond testified that there was no evidence of forced entry. He stated that Laura herself had opened the door to let the police in, and at the time of the incident, only she and Carlene were at home. Detectives reported that inside the home, they found Carlene on the kitchen floor, surrounded by several knives. He also reported that when they saw Laura, she was covered in blood, which was found on her shirt, arms, legs, face, and even on her lips and nose. After reviewing police testimony, the judge sent the case to the jury. On April 16, 2015, Laura Conley was formally charged with the murder of her mother, Carlene Conley. During the trial, the jury heard testimony from approximately 50 witnesses. The prosecution bolstered its case with testimony from police officers involved in the investigation and members of Carlene's family. The defense argued that Laura acted in self-defense. According to her lawyer, the stabbing incident happened due to stress when she was attacked by Carlene. When Laura testified, she told the jury that she and Carlene had been arguing about how she usually celebrated her birthday. During the argument, Carlene picked up a heavy object and struck her on the head. Laura claimed she could not remember anything that happened after being hit, including the 911 call she made. The jury was told that after the crime, when Laura was given a medical examination, experts confirmed that she had cuts on her head and back, along with bruises on her body and a hematoma under her eye. On March 23, 2017, the defense and prosecutors presented their closing arguments. Assistant District Attorney Lawrence presented the evidence to the jury and emphasized the inconsistencies and unverified claims in Lara's defense. That same day, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lara Conley guilty of first-degree murder and recommended a sentence of 27 years in prison. Before the sentencing, Carlene's relatives submitted statements about Lara's influence on Carlene. Virginia, a daughter of Carlene and is Lara's biological sister, described her younger sister as extremely evil and sick. One of Virginia's daughters also criticized Lara harshly. Judge Leake sentenced Lara to 27 years in prison, as recommended by the jury. Another of Carlene's daughters commented that Lara was strange and denied accusations that their mother was cruel. She insisted their mother was not responsible for the conflict, denied allegations that their mother had ever harmed Lara. Lara's defense later filed a motion for a new trial. Lawyers argued that the sentence was invalid because Lara was not given the funds to hire a psychologist who could assess and confirm her mental health conditions, which included issues such as bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. The defense also claimed that, leading up to the incident, Lara had consumed excessive alcohol, along with a nausea medication meant to induce drowsiness. Despite this, she reportedly had not slept for 4 to 5 days. However, the judge dismissed the appeal, rejecting these arguments, and ordered a court-appointed assessment of Lara by mental health experts. After reviewing the experts' report, the court ultimately overturned its initial decision. It was determined that Lara had the right to an independent expert. Additionally, the defense argued for the cancellation of the preliminary trial and called for a new trial, claiming that a mistake had led to Lara being found guilty. The prosecutor's office was permitted to present evidence of a previous attack committed by Lara. In June 2019, the Kent Supreme Court ruled that the trial court had made an error. The decision quashed Lara's 27-year prison sentence and ordered a new trial. However, despite winning the right to a new trial, Lara chose to avoid the retrial and instead signed a plea agreement. This reduced her sentence to 20 years, and she will become eligible for parole in 2032. Lara is currently being held at the Women's Correctional Facility in Kent. For Carlene's loved ones, Lara's conviction marked the end of the legal process, but it did not heal the pain. Their family will never be the same. Carlene's 2 daughters had to continue their lives without their mother's comforting words and warm embrace. The fact that a family member was responsible for Carlene's tragic death makes this story even more heartbreaking. Lara killed her own mother and has shown no remorse for her actions. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deborah Newell. Deborah Newell was a highly successful and affluent woman who had built her fortune through hard work and dedication in the interior design industry. After years of climbing the ranks, she founded her own design firm, Ambrosia, where she spent 3 decades pursuing her passion. Regardless her professional success, her personal life was a different story. She had been married 4 times, but each union ended in divorce. While she was a devoted mother to her 4 children, but her with an intense desire for a happier home life. A few years ago, her family experienced a tragedy. Her sister, Cindy, was brutally murdered by her husband, Billy Vickers, in March 1984. What's more heartbreaking is that their mother testified against Cindy and supported Billy throughout the trial. As a result, Billy spent only a few years in prison for his heinous crime. Deborah was deeply affected by the tragedy, leaving her with anxiety and lingering fear of guns. Despite being encouraged by friends to purchase a pistol for protection, she was unable to bear the thought of having a gun near her, and she lived alone for a long time. Deborah prioritized her physical appearance and lifestyle. She invested significant time and money in skin care, makeup, and hair, and surrounded herself with luxurious items from brands like Chanel, Cartier, Denam, and Gucci. Despite her beautiful life, Deborah felt incomplete without a loving partner. John Meehan was born on February 3, 1958, in California. He grew up with his sisters, Karen and Donna. John's life was influenced by his father, who taught him dishonest ways. This led John to get involved in scams, deal with illegal substances, and often have run-ins with the law, ultimately forcing him to leave California in 1988. After completing his undergraduate studies at Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree, John went on to join the law faculty at the University of Dayton. His striking looks, 6 feet and 3 inches, with hazel green eyes and dark hair, earned him the nickname Dirty John from his friends. He possessed a natural charm that effortlessly attracted women. After John finished his academic journey, he met Tanya Sells, a nurse anesthetist, and they got married in November 1990. Tanya was 25 years old, and John was 31. However, their relationship was built on lies, and John kept his family away from Tanya, telling her they were bad people. Tanya supported John's education as an anesthesiologist while attending medical school in Tennessee. She also helped him get his license to practice anesthesiology. The couple had 2 children, but their marriage began to fall apart over time. Tanya eventually discovered the truth about John's past from his mother and sisters. She also found out that John had been stealing pills from his patients and was addicted to them, which explained his cause of his short temper. Tanya immediately reported John to the police. After an investigation, John admitted his wrongdoing, but instead of surrendering, he left the state and went into hiding at a hotel in Michigan. However, the police found John easily and discovered him unconscious in his hotel room, surrounded by empty pill containers. An ambulance was called, but on the way to the hospital, John woke up, grabbed a medication, and jumped out of the ambulance. He was caught again and eventually sentenced to 6 years in prison in Michigan for resisting arrest and possessing illegal drugs. John spent just 17 months in prison. Then, his sentence was reduced and he was released in 2004. During this time, he met Deborah through online dating. John, then 55, and Deborah, then 59, had both decided to give online dating a try. Deborah was immediately drawn to John's profile, which pretended he was a divorced doctor and a Christian looking for love. Despite having a string of unsuccessful dates, Deborah was delighted to meet John in person. He showed genuine interest in her life and accomplishments, which made her feel appreciated. This was a refreshing change for Deborah, who had been disappointed by her previous dating experiences. John and Deborah's first date took place at a restaurant in Irvine, California, in October 2014. John's aim was to make a great impression on Deborah, which he achieved by sharing false stories about his past. He told her that he had worked with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq, had 2 children, and owned multiple properties. Deborah was captivated by the image of a selfless doctor who had dedicated his life to helping others. John treated Deborah with kindness and respect, making her feel like a queen. This was exactly what Deborah had been longing for, genuine affection. John's charming words left Deborah smitten, and she invited him to her penthouse after dinner. However, John crossed the line this time. After a few kisses, he tried to get intimate with Deborah, but she didn't feel comfortable, so she asked him to leave. The next morning, John apologized profusely, attributing his behavior to too much alcohol and an inability to control his emotions. This admission won back Deborah's trust, and their relationship continued to blossom. As their love progresses, Deborah and John spent more time together. On their 3rd date, he expressed his love for Deborah and proposed to her. She was thrilled with their connection and chose to overlook some red flags. One notable instance was when John wore worn and somewhat unclean medical scrubs to a charity event hosted by Deborah, claiming he hadn't had time to change. Despite this, Deborah proudly introduced him to her friends as her doctor, and they took photos together. Their connection deepened, and they eventually decided to move in together. Deborah's daughter Jason lived with her in the penthouse. Jason was unhappy with the men her mother was dating, and in particular, she had concerns about John. Jason found it unusual that her mother, who had impeccable taste and favored designer brands like Gucci, was in a relationship with someone who wore dirty, unkempt clothing. Jason noticed him showing curiosity about the artwork in her mother's apartment, almost as if he was determining its value. After only meeting for 5 weeks, John convinced Deborah that they should live separately, and they rented a house on Balboa Island's waterfront for $6,500 per month. Deborah paid $80,000 up front to cover several months of rent. However, John opted not to put his name on the lease, citing tax complications as the reason. Deborah was deeply smitten with John and took care of all the expenses, covering everything herself. Unbeknownst to her children, she couldn't understand why they didn't approve of he. John shows Deborah concern for her by making her coffee every morning, helping her with shopping, and generally making her life simpler. Deborah believed that she had finally found her ideal partner and was hopeful that her children would accept him. She envisioned a future where they all came together as a harmonious family. Then, Deborah intended to introduce John to her younger daughter, Tara, who was known for being more laid back and easygoing compared to Jason. Tara visited her mother, Deborah, and John on the day they moved into their new home. Upon meeting he for the first time, Tara felt uneasy due to his unfriendly behavior and lack of enthusiasm for the move. Despite Tara's initial doubts, she decided to give him a chance. However, her worries about John increased due to some suspicious signs. For example, John claimed to own homes in Newport Beach and Palm Springs, but he never discussed them going there to visit or moving there. He also didn't own a car. What's more, he spent most of his days at home, often playing video games. Just before Thanksgiving, Tara decided to secretly go through John's belongings and stumbled upon a nurse's certificate with his name on it. Realizing that John is not the doctor he said he was, Tara confronted him about this. This led to a huge outburst from John, who became angry and began yelling at Tara for trying to ruin her mother's happiness. He insists that Tara will fail to separate them. Deborah just stood there, listening, and eventually, a big argument broke out and ended with Tara leaving the house. John took advantage of the situation to manipulate Deborah into believing that her children were only interested in her wealth and were waiting for her to pass away, thus they not wanting her to be happy. On the eve of Thanksgiving, Deborah's extremely religious mother, Arlene, visited. However, John's attempt to present himself as a religious man in front of Arlene backfires and leads to more arguments. Following this incident, Deborah sought the advice of a psychotherapist. They have advised her to set boundaries with her children and strive for a peaceful life, advice that she chose to follow. Deborah and John moved to Balboa Island, where they enjoyed dining at local restaurants and taking leisurely strolls while admiring the beautiful scenery. Although Deborah was incredibly happy, but she was still worried about John's choice of outfit. His wardrobe consisted mainly of old medical scrubs, loose-fitting and frayed pants, and worn-out shirts. Deborah, on the other hand, wanted he to dress fashionably and complement her lifestyle. He attributed his lack of finer clothes to having them stolen during his time in Iraq. To address this issue, she took John shopping and bought him a complete set of high-end designer outfits. In early December, John went with Deborah on a work-related trip to Las Vegas, where they made the sudden decision to get married after knowing each other for less than 2 months. Deborah chose not to tell her children about this development. Around that time, a mysterious woman managed to get into John and Deborah's home. He used this incident to convince Deborah that they needed better security. He then set up several surveillance cameras around the house that he could control with his smartphone. He even put cameras in Deborah's office, where he could keep an eye on her activities. John's goal was to have complete control over Deborah. As time went on, Deborah started asking John about his family and life before they met. Every time she asked, he came up with a quick excuse or justification, even though his answers didn't quite add up. Deborah dismissed her doubts, thinking she had found the perfect partner. However, her children, especially Jason, were still wary of John. Since he didn't own a car, John used Deborah's, which led Tara and Jacelyn to investigate his activities. They installed a tracking device on John's car to monitor his movements. When this yielded no results, they decided to hire a private investigator to investigate further. The investigators' findings were shocking. John had filed for bankruptcy, held a nursing license but not a medical license, and had lived in multiple states, including Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and California. Furthermore, he had been in the Orange County Jail. When Tara and Jason shared these things with their mother, Deborah, she remained unwavering, stating that her love for John would not change, even if the things were true. In late March, Deborah received a letter meant for John. The letter was from a former prison inmate, but before she could read it, he hastily took it from her. Initially, he was very angry, accusing her of not trusting him. He later claimed that the letter was from a friend he was providing emotional support to. Deborah was uneasy about John's explanation, and her concerns grew. The day after discovering lies, when John's left for work, and she decided to search through his belongings. This search revealed shocking truths about him. She found out that he was a former nurse anesthetist who had become addicted to pain medication, which led to his arrest and the downfall of his career. What's more disturbing is that Deborah discovers that he is a scammer and has been stealing from women he meets online. As Deborah searched further, she found court records showing that John had a search warrant issued for his storage unit. When authorities searched the unit, they found a handgun, bullets, a GPS tracker, syringes, and other suspicious items. This information was alarming. But what caught Deborah's attention was that he had multiple restraining orders against him from different women. The most unsettling fact, however, was that John had been released from prison on October 8th and had met Deborah just days later. Too overwhelmed by these facts, Deborah felt a mix of shock and fear. She realized that John was a violent felon who posed a big threat to her and her children. Despite the danger, Deborah decided to calm and waited for the right moment to take action. When John left for the hospital due to back problems, Deborah seized the opportunity. With her family's help, she quickly moved out of the house while he was away. During the process of packing John's belongings, Deborah discovered some disturbing documents, online comments from other women warning about John's manipulative nature. These comments described him as a skilled deceiver who used his charm and good looks to manipulate others. Convinced that John was unstable, Deborah decided to end their relationship and leave. However, John continued to message her, apologizing and asking her to visit him in the hospital. Feeling guilty, she eventually gave in to his requests. By June 2015, he had managed to persuade Deborah to reconcile with him. He offers a defense about the objects she found and confesses to hiding his past, believing she wouldn't care about it if he were honest. He admitted to lying about being a doctor to impress her and now begged for her help to turn his life around. Deborah decided to give her husband another chance and they moved to a new apartment in Irvine. However, her children were unhappy about the decision and did not want to see her. As a result, Deborah and John temporarily kept a distance from the children. In March 2016, Deborah had been trying to help John overcome his addiction for over a year, during which they had been married. Unfortunately, Deborah's entire family, particularly her daughter Jason, disliked John, and he doesn't like Jason either. The tension between them had grown so severe that John prohibited Deborah from seeing Jason. To make matters worse, John contacted Jason's real estate school, slandering her in front of the teachers. He also sent Jason threatening and vulgar messages, telling her that her mother didn't want anything to do with her. Although he appears to be recovering from rehab, the more cruel and aggressive he became. By April 2016, Deborah finally reached the limit of her tolerance. She wanted to end her relationship peacefully, so she started withdrawing money from her bank account to protect it. $30,000 was hidden in a lower drawer in her home. When John discovered the money, he claimed it belonged to him. And his behavior became increasingly aggressive as he had to accept the fact that their marriage would end in divorce. Realizing she needed to escape, Deborah took some personal items and moved to her friend Jacqueline's apartment in Irvine, which had a secure complex with multiple surveillance cameras. She attempted to obtain a restraining order but was denied by an Orange County judge. John lived in another state and was doing no harm, so all she could do was end the relationship and try to move on. After they separated, John moved to one of Deborah's house in Nevada. Despite her ignoring his calls, he persisted in contacting her. On June 11, 2016, John made another move, aimed at getting Deborah's attention. That day, Deborah drove her Jaguar to work and parked it in the office parking lot. During her work hours, the car was stolen. It was later found about a block and a half away, drenched in gasoline. The car had not been set on fire, it sustained minor damage. Security footage clearly identified John as the perpetrator of the theft. On the evening of August 20, 2016, Tara returned home from work and parked her car in the lot. As she stepped out of the vehicle, she was suddenly confronted by John, who approached her with a knife. He attempted to drag her back into the car, but Tara resisted and screamed for help. In the ensuing struggle, John tried to cover her mouth. But she managed to bite him. Tara, wearing heavy boots, used her leverage to kick John and knock the knife out of his hand. Seizing the opportunity, she picked up the knife and stabbed John multiple times, inflicting a total of 13 wounds. Her final strike was particularly severe, as it pierced his eye. A neighbor witnessed the struggle and rushed to Tara's aid, providing her with a towel to treat her injuries and calling the police. Despite his severe injuries, John was still alive when the paramedics arrived. A search of his car revealed evidence of his sinister intentions, including duct tape, cable ties, kitchen knives, and a passport, suggesting that he had planned to abduct Tara and escape the city with her as a hostage. John was hospitalized for 4 days to receive critical care, but unfortunately, his injuries were fatal, and he passed away at the age of 57. After his death, his body was cremated, and a memorial service was not held. Deborah and her children were severely affected by this. It took a while for Deborah to readjust to her normal life, but the memory still haunts her. She struggles with feelings of guilt for introducing a criminal into her family's life. As a result, Deborah has become extremely vigilant about her safety, carrying a stun gun and pepper spray with her at all times. She has vowed never to meet anyone online again. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sonda Diameter. In December 2018, a group of college students brought their 20-year-old friend Sonda Dia to the emergency room in critical condition. He was unresponsive, extremely pale, and had a body temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. This was unusual because Sonda was a healthy and active young man with no previous health problems. The medical team ran several tests, which revealed that Sonda had hypernatremia, a life-threatening condition caused by too much sodium in the body. Normally, an adult consumes about 2 grams of sodium per day, but Sonda's body contains 160 grams, equivalent to about 2 months' worth of sodium. The medical team asked Sonda's friends what had happened, but they simply shrugged, avoided eye contact and pretended not to know about Sonda's condition. It was clear that something was wrong. Despite the efforts of medical professionals to save him, Sonda, 20, died of multiple organ failure. The autopsy revealed the initial findings. The pathologist examined Sonda's stomach to understand the cause of the seemingly healthy college student's sudden death. To the doctor's surprise and shock, he discovered that he had not eaten or drank any food or water for the past 2 days. Instead, his stomach contained foreign objects such as goldfish from an aquarium, the head of a rat, and the entire head of an eel. This indicated that Sonda had suffered horrific experiences before his death. The case attracted a lot of media attention, quickly becoming an international topic of discussion. Talks broke out about universities covering up shocking student misconduct and the lack of responsibility of the children of wealthy families. A student association called Reusgum was closely monitored. Reusgum, founded more than 70 years ago, is symbolized by a Flemish lion. The secret society has about 30 active male members, mostly law, engineering, and business students from prestigious families. Reusgum is one of the most prestigious and sought-after groups at the prestigious Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, with only 2 or 3 new members admitted each year. The secret society is surrounded by rumors, which makes it all the more mysterious and mysterious. It is like an elite group of students with a lot of power and influence on campus. The Reusgum Student Secret Society has begun planning its annual initiation ceremony for new members. The ceremony includes a unique and daring menu, starting with appetizers such as roasted grasshoppers and cockroaches, followed by a main course of rats and raw fish. Dessert is a mix of coffee and a banned substance. A disturbing photo of a Reusgum fraternity's initiation ceremony has gone viral. The photo shows the group's leaders dressed in worn clothes, while 4 new members are kneeling. 2 of the new members are pictured with a gun pointed at their heads, a pistol, and a rifle. The photo raises many questions. What other types of rituals does this secretive group conduct? What exactly are the events that take place inside the fraternity? Considering the backgrounds of many of its members, parents, politicians, lawyers, prominent doctors, and business leaders, what would they do to protect their children if something truly happened seriously? Sonda never had any aspirations of joining the Reusgum fraternity. Instead, he was a young man born in Belgium to a Senegalese father who sought asylum in the country a few years before he was born. As an immigrant, Sonda's father worked hard to ensure his 2 sons could live a good life. He knew that because of the color of his skin, his children would have to work twice as hard to gain the same respect and career opportunities as native Belgians. Sonda's father, Dia, worked long hours at a factory, spent many nights mastering the local language, and slept or stayed up all night to help his son study. His only desire was for his sons to succeed in life. From a young age, Sonda understood the importance of working towards his goals. He realized that success will not come easily and required perseverance and hard work. As he grew up, Sonda had a close friend named Ferry, who lived nearby. The 2 shared interests such as cycling, comics, and dreams of going to college, finding a good job, saving money, and eventually moving to Japan. They even promised to be lifelong friends and visit Japan together one day. However, fate had other plans for Sonda, and he will never have the chance to visit his dreamland. As a teenager, Sonda had many friends. He had an innate ability to excel in various activities, such as solving complex math problems and playing soccer, which surprised his friends. Despite his special talents, Sonda was loved by everyone for his easygoing and charming personality. He was sociable and easy to get along with, which made it easy for him to make friends. After completing high school, Sonda made his family proud by becoming the first person to attend a prestigious university, the University of Leuven. His father was extremely happy with this achievement, which exceeded his dreams. Although the university was close to home, Sonda chose to live in a dormitory. He pursued civil engineering and was determined to get a master's degree in the field. Sonda's maturity and ambition drove him to make his father proud. His ultimate goal was to graduate, secure a high-paying job, and allow his father to retire, repaying the sacrifices he had made for his children's future. By 2018, Sonda was in his third year of a 5-year program and was already thinking about his career after graduation. In order to achieve his goal of securing a high-paying job to support his family and pay the bills, he stayed away from parties and focused on finding a job. Realizing that his skin color could be a hindrance in a predominantly European industry, and with his high academic achievements, communication skills, and hard work, he realized that building relationships was important. This realization leads him to consider joining the Ryuzgum, a group that has important connections and is essential to his career. Joining the Ryuzgum seems to be a strategic decision. Many of its members come from prominent families, which makes Sonda's decision to apply a surprise to his friends, except for his brother, who understands the potential career advantages of the organization. However, his childhood friend Ferry has reservations about these groups and even tries to dissuade Sonda from joining, seeing it as a potentially dangerous move. If Ferry had known the tragic outcome that would befall Sonda, he would never have stopped trying to stop him. Sonda's decision to join Ryuzgum was not an impulsive one, he considered it carefully. With 2 years left until the end of his studies in 2018, he weighed the pros and cons before making his final decision. Sonda was then one of 10 students who successfully passed Ryuzgum's rigorous selection process. Of these 10, only 3, including Sonda, advanced to the final selection stage. In the first stage, Ryuzgum members screen out candidates who do not match their interests, personalities, or communication styles. Once the final 3 are narrowed down, the real challenge begins. We'll spend 2 months rigorously evaluating the 3 selected, culminating in a 2 to 3 day selection ceremony. During this intense evaluation process, the recruits are subjected to constant, relentless humiliation and complete dependence on the members of the Ryuzgum society. Sonda learns about the brutal initiation rituals of the society, but he is willing to go through with it for the promise of a better future. Like the other 2 candidates, Sonda understands that the process will be difficult and push them to their limits. However, no one anticipates risking their lives in such situations. Sonda's school friend, who belongs to another society, has his own views on the Ryuzgum initiation activities. He sees it as a challenging test of endurance, brotherhood, and self-control. Although he admits that it is difficult, he believes that it is a necessary experience and will ultimately be rewarding. However, Sonda has a very horrifying experience. He is forced to drink too much alcohol. What was even more disturbing was that he was forced to drink the urine of existing members of the society. Sonda and the other newcomers were constantly insulted. Sonda had the worst of it. He was ridiculed for the color of his skin, which made his experience even more unpleasant. In October 2018, the society held a large event at the Student Union building. New members, including Sonda, were forced to kneel and take turns drinking large amounts of strong alcohol. Despite this, the newcomers were still forced to clean up the place. They stumbled across the floor, trying to clean up their own and others' vomit. The experience was traumatic and humiliating for Sonda and the other new members. That night, the 3 new members were ordered to clean up, but the Ryuzgum brothers had other plans. They decide that only the dark-skinned man, Sonda, will be cleaned, citing historical precedent where dark-skinned men served white men. Sonda feels powerless to protest, but he is determined to overcome it. Knowing that this situation will eventually end, Sonda worked hard to be accepted into the society, but at the age of 20, he was still quite naive. Despite the pain he had gone through, Sonda continued to attend the society's meetings. Sonda loved his father, who had sacrificed a lot for his education, and Sonda was determined to make him proud. Sonda hoped that the humiliation would end once he passed the final hurdle. The Ryuzgum Society, which has a history of over 70 years, had only 2 members of African descent. In 2015, a dark-skinned student was inducted, and Sonda was about to become the second person to undergo the final initiation ceremony, also known as baptism. On December 4, 2018, the initiation process for new members began at 4 p.m. In the first challenge, 3 candidates, including Sonda, wear long, flowing white robes and walk into town with bouquets of flowers. Their goal is to sell as many flowers as possible by the end of the challenge. The person who sells the fewest flowers is punished. These punishments include drinking yogurt and other unpleasant substances. Sonda ends up in last place, selling 30 fewer roses than his competitors. This leads to his punishment, where he is forced to drink a significant amount of alcohol, affecting his ability to speak. The initiation moves into the second phase. The new members, now kneeling, are asked simple questions. However, by 7 p.m., the members of the association have become less tolerant of Sonda's inability to answer these questions clearly. Unsurprisingly, he is defeated by the other competitors and faces further punishments. His punishment was to drink a bottle and a half of gin. His body, not used to the large amount of alcohol, began to react painfully. His stomach was filled with the alcohol he had drunk. Sonda's health quickly deteriorated, leaving him unable to walk, talk, or move, as he faced severe dehydration and passed out repeatedly. Surprisingly, this incident took place in a public place, right on the sidewalk in front of a cafe in the city square. However, no passers-by intervened or called the police for help. At 9 p.m., the third challenge called Endure the Night began. The student council took the new recruits to their dormitory, where the 18 student council brothers continued to torture them relentlessly. This time, the participants were required to drink as much beer as possible. By the end of the ordeal, all 3 participants were unconscious, although they were still breathing. However, this did not stop the continued abuse. According to the order's custom, when someone faints, they are urinated on by the order's members. A video was recorded of these actions at 11:40 p.m., but the perpetrators attempted to delete the footage. When the first day of the event ended, the new members were taken to their quarters and violently thrown onto their beds. The water supply was cut off as a prank. The initiates' belongings were vandalized with ketchup and chocolate, and they were locked up. This meant that if any of them woke up, they would not have access to water to relieve their dehydration, having consumed a potentially fatal amount of alcohol. This was just the beginning of a week-long initiation ceremony at one of the country's most esteemed universities. But the most traumatic experiences were yet to come. The next day, December 5, 2018, at around 10:30 a.m., the members of the order were ready to begin the final stage of the initiation ceremony. They woke up the 3 new members, loaded them into a car, and drove out of the city to a remote village about an hour away. One of the members of the order had a small, isolated house surrounded by dense forests, ideal for keeping their activities secret. Along the way, they stopped several times to purchase the necessary items for the ceremony. They visited a pet store to buy items such as aquarium fish, eels, live rodents, as well as bird and dog food from a pet store. They then stopped at a supermarket to buy various products, including fish sauce. However, this sauce is high in sodium and is not usually consumed in large quantities. They also bought duck eggs, sardines, clams, shrimp paste, mussels, and other seafood products. During their stop, a professor approached the group of students and noticed that one of the students was in need of help. She expressed her concerns to the society members and even suggested calling the police. However, the society members, quickly convincing her that the student was simply drunk and in shock, stated that the initiation ceremony was over and that they would help him recover by giving him a cold shower. This seemed to allay the professor's concerns. The group then went to a cabin in the woods. The police have reconstructed the details of what happened next through the recovered deleted footage and some evidence. The truth about the events that took place in that forest is still unclear. For several hours, the three beginners had to dig a large hole, which they were then placed in. Other members of the student union surrounded the hole. They filled it with cold water and live eels. In Belgium, the average temperature in December is around +3 to +7 degrees Celsius. When the newcomers start shivering from the cold, the members of the society urinate on them from above, a strange act that is said to warm them. At this point, Sando was dehydrated and still drunk from the night before. Even if he wanted to get up and leave, he couldn't. Normally, if a new initiate wanted to stop, he would just ring a bell placed at the edge of the pit, but this time the bell had been removed, leaving Sando with no way to indicate that he wanted to stop. His physical condition, unable to stand or speak, left him helpless. The three new members, exhausted and drunk, were forced to sit in ice water and endure the urination and defecation of the members of the order. They were then forced to bite the heads of rats and eels that lived in the water and drink fish oil. After 6 hours of enduring these brutal conditions, Sando's body began to weaken and he passed out. Finally, he was taken out of the water, dressed in dry clothes, and placed next to the fire. As he curled up on the ground for 2 hours, the initiation ritual continued around him. As Sando's health deteriorated, instead of seeking immediate medical help, the fraternity members spent their time taking pictures and recording Sando's painful images and sounds. Sando's body was now reacting violently to the excessive sodium intake, leading to high blood pressure and a nosebleed. Sando then passed out. Time passed. It wasn't until 8:57 p.m. that one of the fraternity members decided to call an ambulance. The students then drove Sando to the hospital, but instead of placing him safely in the back seat, they deliberately placed him in the trunk to avoid dirtying the car's interior. Upon arriving at the hospital, the association members deliberately withheld important information from the medical team regarding Sando's diet and recent alcohol consumption. After dropping him off and handing him over to the medical team, the group of students left immediately, saying that the ceremony would resume as soon as Sando was discharged from the hospital. A decision that did not take much care of Sando's health. While medical professionals were investigating the cause of his condition, Sando's internal organs began to fail. He was eventually transferred to Antwerp University Hospital for more advanced care and better facilities. There, he fell into a coma, and Sando's heart stopped, and the 20-year-old tragically passed away. The cause of death was determined to be high levels of sodium in his body due to his excessive consumption of fish sauce during the ritual. This prompted the hospital to notify the police, who immediately opened an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Sando's death. As news of Sando's death spread, 2 other ritual participants were rushed to the hospital at 10:40 p.m. after their conditions worsened. Their parents also rushed to the hospital upon learning of their child's serious condition. Meanwhile, the members of the cult attempted to cover their tracks by destroying all evidence. They filled in a trench used in the ritual, cleaned up the room where they used ketchup and chocolate, turned on the water supply, and deleted incriminating messages, photos, and videos from their phones. However, when the police arrived, they were still able to recover the deleted data from the cult members' mobile devices. The investigation into Sando's death has been difficult, despite the considerable amount of evidence that has been collected. The members involved belonged to powerful families whose parents quickly sought legal representation. Although the evidence linking the 18 members of the student body to Sando's death grew stronger, the investigation dragged on and was repeatedly thwarted by powerful parents. All 18 students deleted their social media profiles and limited their communication, speaking only through their lawyers. Following Sando's tragic death, the Reusgum student body was eventually dissolved, and the university disciplined the students involved, requiring them to complete 30 hours of community service. Despite the severity of the incident, none of the students were expelled. The group of 18 completed their studies without any significant consequences. A group of teachers protested the lenient punishment, writing an open letter in support of harsher punishments for the group, but no additional measures were taken against the students. The legal process of the case was completed in July 2020. However, the lawyers for the Reusgam members tried to reframe the case as a tragic accident caused by Sonda's poor health. It was not until May 26, 2023, that the court finally issued its verdict. The court found 18 Reusgam students guilty of manslaughter and mistreatment. Each member was fined €400, ordered to perform community service, and ordered to compensate the victim's family about €30,000. The court decided not to reveal the identities of the students responsible in order to protect their future. The relatively light sentences caused widespread outrage, leading to protests in several cities. However, while these protests took place, the outcome remained the same. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Dishon. Jessica Dishon was born on May 2, 1982, in the small town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky, USA. It was a quiet place where many residents made their living from farming and were very close to one another. Jessica had two younger brothers, Christopher and Michael. From a young age, she helped her parents, Mike and Edna, take care of them while they were at work. This made Jessica more independent, and her parents could always count on her. When she was 15, she started working part-time at a local restaurant, saving money to buy her first car. She dreamed of owning a red Pontiac, and after a few years, she had saved enough money to make this dream come true. Despite her part-time job, Jessica still achieved very good academic results and began planning to go to college to become an accountant. In the fall of 1999, when Jessica was 17, she entered her senior year and started dating a boy, which made her very excited. On the morning of Friday, September 10th, as usual, Jessica's parents went to work while she was still sleeping, and her younger brothers went to the bus stop and then to school. Jessica stayed home and was supposed to drive to school by herself. However, right after her brothers left, around noon, her mother, Edna, returned home and immediately noticed something strange. Jessica's car was parked in front of the house, even though she was supposed to be in class at that time. Edna went to Jessica's room, guessing that she might have overslept and not gone to school. However, Jessica was not in her bedroom. Edna then thought that, for some reason, Jessica might have asked her father, Mike, to drive her to school. She immediately called Mike, but he said he had gone to work alone that morning. Edna suspected that there was a problem with Jessica's car, so she took the spare key to try to start it. However, as she approached the car, she noticed a few disturbing things. The driver's door was slightly open. Jessica's cell phone was on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 displayed on the screen, and under the front seat were a pair of shoes and her keys. In the back seat were her textbooks, work clothes, and purse. Edna immediately worried that the worst could have happened. It was clear that someone had tried to call 911 from Jessica's phone but couldn't get through. Furthermore, Jessica couldn't have left all her belongings in the car and left unexpectedly. Her family lived in the suburbs, so she would have had to walk several miles. Jessica's parents called the school and learned that she had missed class. However, the school did not notify them as they should have. A few hours later, Jessica's best friend from the place where they both worked called her parents, saying that Jessica had not shown up for her shift, which made them even more worried. Worried about Jessica's absence from school and work, as well as her belongings, including her phone with the 9 and 1 dial displayed being left in an unlocked car, her parents decided to call the police. However, the sheriff simply assumed that Jessica might have wandered off and would eventually return home. He did not notice that one of her shoes was left in the car, making it difficult for her to travel far without it. Jessica's parents tried to convince the sheriff that their daughter might be in danger, but despite their pleas, he refused to open an investigation, leaving them with no choice but to return home. After that, her parents took it upon themselves to search for her and contact acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. The next day, her parents returned to the sheriff and reported that Jessica had not returned home. This time, the police went to check Jessica's car but found another problem. The officers had searched the car without gloves, touching everything inside with their bare hands. They also did not follow standard procedure for checking Jessica's room. Jessica's parents, once again frustrated with the lack of professionalism from law enforcement, so sought the help of local media to draw attention to their daughter's disappearance and the police's lack of concern. Together with relatives and friends, they searched on their own and distributed flyers with information about Jessica. The search was led by Jessica's father and his brother, who were familiar with the area. Fearing the worst, they decided to search near a local river. The area had a bad reputation as it was dense, isolated, and popular with drug dealers and other criminals. For hours, Jessica's relatives searched the difficult terrain along the river but found no trace of her. The next morning, something unusual happened. Jessica's parents were at home, and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, the boy ran into the house, saying he heard a cry for help that sounded like his sister's. Jessica's father immediately grabbed the shotgun and ran outside to find the source of the cry. At the same time, his brother drove up to the house to join the search. Not long after, they noticed smoke coming from the property of their neighbor, a 40-year-old man named David Brooks. When they approached, they saw him burning something on the ground, which looked very suspicious. Jessica's father asked David for permission to search his farm. However, David refused and asked them to leave. It was not just David's strange behavior that was noteworthy. Before Jessica's disappearance, her family had maintained a normal relationship with David and his family. However, after Jessica went missing, David began to act strangely. He often drove slowly past Jessica's family's house and stared at them with a disturbing expression. Additionally, Jessica's parents received strange phone calls from a man who only panted without saying anything. Jessica's family suspected David might have had something to do with their daughter's disappearance, but they could not understand why he was behaving so oddly. Jessica's parents decided to contact the police again, despite having previously failed to get significant attention from the agency. They shared their observations, urged the officers to search David's property with dogs, and agreed to use Jessica's clothes to search for clues. The dogs led them to a fire pit on David's property, but they found no significant evidence. However, they did discover a pair of black gloves in one of the sheds, which indicated the presence of an odor associated with decomposition. Despite David's suspicious behavior, the police were still unable to connect him to Jessica's disappearance, and once again, they came up empty-handed. Frustrated with the local police, Jessica's father decided to contact the FBI. While the FBI typically did not investigate if only based on calls from relatives of missing persons, they decided to get involved immediately due to the disturbing facts presented by Jessica's parents. After a careful investigation, the FBI concluded that something truly terrible might have happened to Jessica. From this point on, a real investigation began, one that the local police had been reluctant to conduct. FBI agents collected fingerprints from Jessica's room and car, seized all potential evidence for analysis, and sent it to the lab. They also organized an extensive ground search using helicopters and gathered volunteers. Additionally, they thoroughly examined the bottom of the pond near Jessica's house, considering the possibility that her body might be there. FBI agents conducted a thorough search of David's farm and found a printed photo of Jessica. After this discovery, detectives were almost certain that David was involved in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother, Joseph, because he acted strangely while police were searching his property. Although investigators did not find enough evidence to arrest the brothers, they focused their efforts on thoroughly searching the area, as it was becoming increasingly likely that Jessica was no longer alive. On September 27, 17 days after Jessica went missing, police received a call from a woman driving along the road near where Jessica's father had been searching for her. The woman had seen a strange object near a tree on the side of the road and decided to check it out. The woman was shocked to discover it was a body. She immediately called the police. The FBI arrived at the scene and confirmed that the body was that of a young woman who was missing several fingers and toes. She had been bound with a rope that had traces of red and silver paint on her feet, and some of her clothing was also missing, suggesting that she had been sexually assaulted. Unfortunately, the state of decomposition of the body made it difficult to identify the victim. The police went to Jessica's home and asked her parents to assist in the identification process. Jessica's father was unable to look directly at body, but her mother agreed to do so. When she arrived at the scene, Edna initially could not identify her. However, Edna later noticed a small butterfly tattoo on the body that was identical to her daughter's and located in the same spot. Medical professionals later confirmed the deceased's identity as Jessica Dishon and determined that her cause of death was strangulation. Several bruises were also found on her body. The autopsy revealed that she had been alive for about 3 days after her disappearance, as her legs, arms, and fingers were still intact. This indicated that the police had a chance to save her, but they did not take any action to do so. After Jessica's body was discovered, the FBI decided to re-interview David. In the first interview, David claimed to have seen Jessica near her home on the morning she went missing. However, in a subsequent interview, he changed his story, stating that he had not seen her at all that day. He then claimed that he had been home in bed with his wife that morning. When detectives questioned David's wife, she contradicted his account. The FBI continued to question David, asking him what he would do if they found his fingerprints on the victim's body, even though no such evidence was discovered. David's response was suspicious. He said he would have to confess everything in that case. He subsequently failed a polygraph test, prompting the FBI to arrest him and proceed with trial. Although no solid evidence linked David to the murder, there were troubling circumstantial signs of his involvement, and the likelihood of a guilty verdict remained relatively low. Investigators continued to seek additional evidence as they prepared for trial. They recalled finding a rope similar to the one used to bind the victim's legs during a search of David's car. However, no DNA was found on it, making it an inconclusive piece of evidence. The trial began in January 2003, and David's attorney argued that there was insufficient evidence to convict his client. During the investigation, authorities discovered several missing body parts of the victim near the scene. They placed the parts in special containers and turned them over to local police, provide the requirement to keep them in a refrigerator. However, they left the containers at room temperature, which caused the parts to decompose quickly. Because the DNA and other evidence against David were not strong enough and the jury could not reach a unanimous decision, he was released. Under state law, he could only be charged again if new evidence was found. For Jessica's parents, this was a devastating blow. They were almost certain that David was the culprit behind their daughter's death. Furthermore, if the police had taken their job more seriously, their daughter might have been saved. Ultimately, they lost all hope for justice. In the years that followed, the case remained unsolved and gradually faded from memory. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department. She was assigned to investigate cold cases, initially focusing on the murder of Jessica Dishon. When she reviewed the case files, she was shocked by the negligence of her predecessors. Most of the documents were filled with errors, lacked references to conversations with interested parties, and the evidence was not properly documented. The case had been handled so inefficiently that she had to start the investigation from scratch, although already 13 years after the murder. Lynn's first step was to contact Jessica's family. One of Jessica's brothers, now grown and living on his own, gave Lynn a box of Jessica's belongings that had been taken from her car. He had kept it since the police returned the items to the family. Lynn was once again confronted with her colleagues' poor handling of evidence, as it had not been properly stored. Although, after all these years, these items were unlikely to help her, she persisted in examining everything she could find. Through her research, she discovered information about David's medical examination results, which showed that his IQ was only 61, extremely low. This raised concerns about police operations, particularly regarding the questioning of him. Based on his significantly low IQ, he may not have fully understood the questions and may have given incomplete answers. This could indicate that he may not have been involved in the case, as his unusual behavior could be explained by his extremely low IQ. After a thorough investigation of everyone involved or living near the scene, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death, a colleague from another department called Lynn and shared new information from an inmate at the Kentucky State Prison who claimed to know the true identity of Jessica's killer. Lynn approached this lead with skepticism because, many times, when inmates try to provide information to the police, the end result is often frustration and wasted time. Many of them make up stories in hopes of getting released early or improving their prison conditions. However, she understood that this lead could not be ignored without verification. She visited the prison and met a man who was said to have relevant information. According to the man, he had shared a cell with a convicted child molester, the same crime as him. They became friends and exchanged details about their crimes. One day, the inmate told him that he had killed Jessica. The informant then revealing the man's name. It was Stanley Dish, Jessica's uncle and her father's younger brother. According to the informant, Stanley had confessed that he had sexually abused Jessica for years while they lived in the same household. Stanley had threatened to kill Jessica or her relatives if she spoke out. In the spring of 1999, when Jessica had a boyfriend, Stanley began to fear that she would eventually reveal her abuse by him. On the morning of September 10th, Stanley went to Jessica's home while she was alone. Jessica was getting into her car to leave when Stanley asked her to break up with her boyfriend. Jessica refused and threatened to report him if he did not leave her alone. When he refused, Stanley began to threaten Jessica. She tried to call 911, but Stanley grabbed her. Eventually, Jessica broke free and ran into the house. Stanley chased her down, beat her, then tied her up with bed sheets and took her to a nearby abandoned warehouse, where she was later found dead. Stanley held her captive for a long time, torturing and mentally abusing her before killing her. He then moved her body to a visible location near the road and buried it beneath the warehouse. He also claimed that after the murder, he had dismembered some of her body parts, hoping to deceive the police into thinking it was a drug deal gone wrong. Detective Lynn realized that information about the dismembered body parts had never been made public. Only Jessica's closest friends knew about it, so the informant could not have made this up. Finally, the man added that Stanley had buried Jessica's shoe under a broken tree near the shed. Lynn decided to verify all this information by searching for evidence. However, the local police station was short-staffed, so no one there could help her. She contacted Jessica's brother and a few other relatives, who agreed to join the search. She didn't tell them that Stanley might be the killer because she wanted to find some evidence to support these shocking accusations first. On the first day, they didn't find any clues in the heavy rain. They dug in areas that matched the description, but to no avail. The next day, Jessica's brother and Lynn returned to the scene. On the way, he showed her an abandoned shed on the side of the road. They went there and started digging inside, and almost immediately found a significant breakthrough. They discovered a buried bedsheet. Lynn collected this evidence and quickly went to Jessica's house. Over the years, Jessica's room had been kept exactly as it had been when her missing. Thanks to this, Lynn was able to confirm that the bedsheet found was part of Jessica's bedding, as it was not on the bed, and the other linens had the same pattern. Shortly after the evidence was discovered, Stanley was arrested and questioned. Although he appeared very nervous during the interrogation, he still refused to admit to the crime. He was eventually charged with murder, and the case went to trial. Jessica's father, Mike, could not believe that his own brother would commit such a cruel act against his daughter. He went through a period of complete denial but eventually accepted this unbearable truth. He recalled that in the early days of Jessica's disappearance, it was Stanley who suggested searching for the body near the riverbank. However, during the search, he suddenly felt nauseous and was taken home by his brother. It turned out that this incident occurred just a few hundred meters from the warehouse where Jessica lived, suggesting that Stanley had deliberately distracted them from searching for her while she was still alive. During the preparation for the trial, Detective Lynn carefully researched Stanley's past. She discovered that he had a previous conviction for assaulting another girl in the family. In addition, several other women reported that he had sexually abused them when they were children. He often took advantage of his relationship to stay at the victims' homes, then committed the crimes by threatening them not to speak out. The police concluded that he had committed these acts over a period of 3 decades. However, Detective Lynn found that securing a murder conviction would be difficult due to the lack of direct evidence such as fingerprints or DNA. She dug deeper into the case and stumbled upon an old box of files that had not been examined. When she looked through the contents, she was shocked again by the incompetence of those who had originally handled the case. The box contained a letter dated June 26, 2002, in which another informant had written to the police with the same story that Lynn had only heard 12 years later from a Kentucky inmate. In the summer of 2002, Stanley had been convicted of assaulting an underage relative. During that time, he had told a fellow inmate, who happened to be a police informant, about killing Jessica. The fellow inmate had written a letter to the department handling the case, revealing the gruesome details of what Stanley had done to his niece. The police simply ignored the letter and, perhaps believing that David had been involved all those years ago, did not consider other suspects. Lynn was frustrated by the lack of professionalism from her colleagues. Had they paid more attention to their work, the case might have been solved in 2002. For years, Jessica's family could only wait for the trial, hoping that Stanley would finally face the justice that had been delayed for his actions. The case began in 2015, and Stanley proclaimed his innocence. In court, Jessica's parents could barely look at the relative who had destroyed their lives. They were also furious that he would not admit to his actions to help them gain closure. The prosecution was concerned that the chances of securing a conviction for murder were slim, mainly due to the lack of substantial evidence. They were also worried about the charges of assault against the other girls in the family, as these witnesses would have to come to court and describe Stanley's behavior toward them in detail. To clarify, the prosecutor negotiated a plea deal with Stanley. Under the terms of the deal, the death penalty would be waived if Stanley pleaded guilty to the assault on his relative and to Jessica's murder. Stanley agreed to the deal, however. Part of the agreement stipulated that he did not have to reveal any further details about the crime. Jessica's parents were unhappy about this, as they wanted to know the whole truth. In the end, Stanley was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Stanley was sentenced at the age of 56 and could have been released at the age of 71. After the trial, Jessica's father stated that if his brother hadn't died in prison, he would have waited for him to figure things out for himself. In 2019, Stanley gave his first interview and insisted that he did not kill Jessica. He claimed he was on his way to work that morning, but 2 decades later, he couldn't prove it. He could not explain why two independent informants had similar stories, including details only the killer would know, such as where the bedsheets were buried. David Brooks stated that police had not ruled out his involvement in the case. Stanley, who knew him, may have asked for his help in disposing of the victim's belongings. Due to his low IQ, Brooks may not have understood the full extent of the situation. It is possible that he burned Jessica's clothes in a fire and that Stanley gave him gloves that had a scent detectable by dogs. However, the truth may never be revealed, as Brooks passed away in 2021 due to heart problems. On the third day after Jessica went missing, her younger brother heard screams outside and thought it was his sister calling for help. However, it is impossible to say for certain what happened at that time. Jessica could still be alive, but Stanley might have kept her in a shed a few miles from her home. In this case, it is more likely that the child imagined the incident due to stress or that someone else was screaming. However, there is another theory, although it seems unlikely. We know that shortly after Jessica's father rushed out, Stanley drove up to the house, which indicates he was nearby. Therefore, it is possible that the girl was in his car with her mouth covered or unconscious. In spite of this hypothesis appears very unlikely. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She has an older brother, and a loving mother. Although her father was absent from their lives, but Lisa and her mother shared an exceptionally close bond, rarely arguing. Those who knew them admired the harmony in their relationship. During her teenage years, Lisa developed a passion for dancing. She also became interested in IT, which was a relatively new field at the time. Notably, she was an early user of email, using it before many of her friends knew of its existence. This interest significantly influenced her future career path. Following college, Lisa got a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother later used her savings to purchase a small studio apartment for Lisa in a prestigious neighborhood, which offered a stunning city view. Living alone, Lisa advanced in her career, prioritized family time, and continued dancing, attending weekly practice sessions with her best friend. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, who was 36 at the time, hosted an evening gathering with her mother and some family friends. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes and then headed home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, Lisa's mother thought she was simply busy, especially since she had dance practice scheduled for that day. However, as the day progressed without any communication from Lisa, her mother began to worry. The following day, Lisa's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. She continued attempting to reach Lisa, but her calls went unanswered. On Monday, the fourth day since they last spoke, Lisa's colleagues contacted her mother to express their concern that Lisa had not shown up for work and was not responding to their calls. This was highly unusual, as Lisa was known for her reliability and always notified her workplace if she needed to take a day off. Lisa's mother grew increasingly concerned, so she decided to visit an apartment complex to check on her. When she arrived, she witnessed a disturbing scene. The building was surrounded by police tape and there were a lot of police officers. She asked the police what was going on, and they told her that earlier that day, some residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The building manager checked and found an unlocked door, then went inside and found a body on the floor, and they called the police. The police then were promptly called to the scene. Police officers quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed clear signs of trauma and decomposition, indicating she had been murdered several days prior. The presence of blood stains on the floor and bed, along with her partially undressed state and underwear found next to her body, suggested she had been being attacked and sexually abused. The room was in disarray, but further investigation revealed that this was typical of Lisa's living habits. The TV was on, and the air conditioner was set to 78 degrees. No signs of robbery were present, with valuables and jewelry left untouched. However, Lisa's keys and a gym bag were missing. A peculiar detail was the removal of some of Lisa's hair by the attacker, hinting at strong personal motives. The numerous injuries on her body further supported this theory. The detectives suspected that the killer might have had a prior relationship with Lisa and cherish a deep-seated hatred for her, given the lack of forced entry and the secure nature of the fenced apartment complex. Additionally, the apartment complex was secured with a fence, and access required either a key or to be let in by a resident. The police began interviewing residents in the apartment building, searching for someone who might have seen the attacker. They quickly found a lead when one of Lisa's neighbors reported that 2 days earlier, upon returning from vacation, he noticed damage to the metal frame of his front door and a faint blood stain. Although he had informed the manager, but they decided not to report it to the police, as it appeared his apartment had not been broken into. Detectives believed the same person who killed Lisa was responsible for the damage to the neighbor's door. However, the motives behind these actions were unclear. One theory was that the killer tried to break into the neighbor's apartment, was caught by Lisa, and subsequently murdered her. Another theory suggested the attempted break-in might have occurred after Lisa's murder, which seemed unusual. Detectives speak with the housekeeper who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. 2 days before Lisa's body was found, the housekeeper attempted to enter the apartment, but found the door blocked from the inside. Through a crack in the door, she saw a partially undressed woman on the floor and heard a man's voice. Believing she was interrupting a private moment, she left immediately. Police suspected that Lisa was already dead at this time and the man's voice belonged to her killer, who was still inside the apartment. The housekeeper mentioned a suspicious detail, a black bag with a zipper near the body. However, she was uncertain since she only caught a glimpse. On the inside of Lisa's apartment door, an envelope with cash was taped, untouched. This money was intended for the housekeeper, a frequent habit of Lisa. The fact that the envelope was still there suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother departed, sometime between midnight and the early hours of the morning, which would have been when Lisa normally left the payment. Neighbors from the floor below corroborated these things. They reported hearing thuds and someone descending the stairs, although they didn't see the individual. As detectives searched Lisa's apartment, they discovered an unusual detail: the toilet seat was up, uncommon for a woman living alone. Forensic experts found a partial fingerprint that didn't match Lisa's. The police collected fingerprints from Lisa's acquaintances and relatives who may have visited her apartment, but none matched. This led detectives to believe that the fingerprint might belong to the killer. The medical experts completed their report, revealing new information about Lisa's case. Her body had over 20 stab wounds, but due to decomposition, it was unclear if she had been sexually assaulted. However, defensive wounds on her body suggested that Lisa had attempted to fight off her attacker. Furthermore, skin particles were found under her nails, which were likely from the killer, and were sent to the lab for analysis. In the meantime, forensic experts analyzed evidence from the apartment and discovered a crucial clue: a pillowcase with multiple blood stains. Upon closer examination, it was determined that not all of the blood on the pillowcase belonged to Lisa, as some of the stains were from a different source. As a result, the pillowcase was sent to the lab for further testing. Investigators suggested that the killer may have unintentionally hurt himself while stabbing Lisa, which can happen when using a knife. Supporting this hypothesis was the discovery of 2 bandages from a first aid kit inside the toilet. The killer might have used these to stop his bleeding and potentially left fingerprints on the toilet seat when disposing of the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase came from an unknown male not listed in the FBI database. This man's DNA also matched skin particles under Lisa's nails and a blood stain on her pillowcase. Despite no matches in the DNA database, detectives obtained the killer's DNA profile. They then compared it to DNA samples from suspects in their system who had committed crimes in Lisa's area and closely examined her acquaintances. Lisa's mother shared information about Lisa's relationship with a man named Albert Ketto, stating they had plans for a date the day following the murder. However, these plans were canceled by Albert a few days beforehand. When detectives questioned Ketto, they noticed a large cut on his hand, which made them suspect him as the killer. And he might have injured themselves while stabbing Lisa. Despite this, Albert denied any involvement in the murder. The detectives took his fingerprints and DNA samples for comparison, but surprisingly, they did not match the blood on the pillowcase or the skin particles found under Lisa's nails. Investigators continued their search for other suspects by reviewing the messages on Lisa's answering machine from the days leading up to the murder. After making a list of 40 people texting Lisa, they found one message particularly suspicious. Just hours before the murder, while Lisa still had guests at her home, a man called her, but she didn't pick up, he leaving a strange message. "You know how it goes, Tita. Hey Lisa, are you home?" When police played this message for one of Lisa's friends, the friend immediately identified the voice as Albert Robinson, a work colleague of Lisa's. Albert had made his feelings for Lisa known, but she had rejected his advances. Despite this, they remained friendly at work and, with Lisa considering him a friend. During the memorial service for Lisa, something else happened. Albert attended the service and delivered a speech that left everyone perplexed. He asserted that he and Lisa were intensely in love and had plans to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother disputed Albert's things, stating that they were entirely false. According to them, Lisa had mentioned that Albert had expressed interest in her, but she did not reciprocate his feelings. Lisa's mother also emphasized that Lisa would have confided in her about such significant plans. Albert was questioned by the police and he denied being involved in Lisa's murder. He claimed to love her and said he would never hurt her. However, he refused to give the police his DNA sample and fingerprints, which raised suspicions. As a result, detectives continued to investigate him and look for new evidence. It is possible that Lisa's failure to reciprocate Albert's feelings made him hate her and kill her in revenge. The violent nature of the murder suggested that it was personal, and the fact that the killer cut off some of Lisa's hair and took it with him could be related to Albert's fixation on her. Detectives got a search warrant for Albert's house and found it filled with dozens of Lisa's photos, further evidence of his obsession. Despite this, he continued to deny any involvement in the murder. He voluntarily provided his fingerprints and DNA, which were sent to the lab for analysis. However, the lab results showed no match with the DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, he was cleared as a suspect, and the investigation continued. Years went by with no new leads, and the case remained unsolved. Investigators regularly checked DNA and fingerprint databases, hoping the killer would be caught for another crime, but there were no matches. Police were initially baffled that the perpetrator of such a heinous crime did not appear in any databases, so they doubted it was his first serious offense. Despite ongoing searches over the years, the police couldn't find any matches. Lisa's mother made multiple television appearances, pleading for anyone with information to come forward, yet detectives remained without new leads. In 2010, detectives discovered the FBI had begun utilizing a new DNA technology to identify suspects by comparing their DNA samples with those in the database to find relatives. This method, unlike genetic genealogy which emerged later, was only effective for locating close relatives, such as a father or brother. With no other leads, police requested a comparison in 2011 and waited. On September 2nd, lead detective Ive received a call from the FBI. They said that when the experts retested the DNA sample, they got a perfect match. The DNA from blood and skin particles under her nails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, who had recently been added to the FBI database. Anthony had a lengthy criminal record that went back decades, but previously, his crimes didn't qualify for his DNA to be included in the FBI database. However, due to updates in legislation, it became mandatory for individuals convicted of crimes in California to provide DNA samples, irrespective of how minor the offense was. Anthony's DNA sample was added to the database following his arrest for a minor shoplifting offense. In addition to his DNA, his fingerprints were also entered into the database, and they were found to match a fingerprint discovered on Lisa's toilet seat. Specialists were even able to pinpoint which specific finger left the print with relative ease. Before arresting Anthony, detectives searched for more evidence linking him to the crime. They stumbled upon a new clue. 13 years prior, police had reviewed messages left on Lisa's answering machine, but only those received before her murder. Now, after all these years, detectives found that Anthony had left a message for Lisa just a day after her death. The message itself was unremarkable and didn't raise suspicions. However, if the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they won't just find out his dense criminal history but also another important piece of information. Upon reviewing Lisa's belongings, detectives discovered Anthony's phone number in her address book, which confirmed that Lisa and Anthony knew each other. Further investigation, including conversations with Lisa's friends, revealed that Lisa and Anthony had dated briefly in high school. With this new information, detectives felt they had sufficient grounds to question Anthony. However, since he didn't have a fixed address at the time, they decided to approach him cautiously to prevent him from fleeing. When they arrested him, they initially told him that he was being investigated in connection with a series of robberies in San Francisco. Anthony surrendered without resistance. During the interrogation, detectives initially asked Anthony about the robberies. They then inquired about his relationship with Lisa. Initially, Anthony denied knowing Lisa, but when shown her photo, he acknowledged that they had known each other in high school. He also claimed that he hadn't seen her since the late 1980s. Detectives spent several hours questioning Anthony about his relationship with Lisa and whether he had seen her recently. When investigators confronted Anthony about the DNA evidence found in Lisa's apartment from 1998, his response was unexpected. He burst into tears and requested a pen and paper, seemingly prepared to confess. However, instead of writing a confession, he began hitting himself with the pen. Authorities had to restrain him as he continued crying and shouting, claiming he was being framed for a crime he didn't commit. Following this, Anthony was charged with Lisa's murder, and her family was informed that her killer had finally been caught. The trial was delayed by 4 years. Then, when it began, Anthony appeared confident, even smirking. However, later he began displaying religious symbols, such as carrying a Bible and wearing a cross. Detectives believed this was a tactic to sway the jury. Anthony's lawyer argued that he was physically incapable of committing the crime. A medical condition, diagnosed 5 years prior, had weakened his muscles, making it extremely difficult to perform repetitive movements. The lawyer argued that given this condition, Anthony could not have inflicted the more than 20 stab wounds found on Lisa. According to the medical report that year, Anthony's health condition was recovered well at the time of the murder. The prosecution had strong evidence that placed Anthony at the scene case, including his skin under Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. However, regardless of the evidence against him, Anthony consistently denied having seen Lisa since the late 80s. The prosecution presented a theory that Anthony had gone to Lisa's home, attempted to initiate intimate contact with she, and when she rejected, he brutally murdered her. After the crime, he cut off a piece of her hair and took it with him as he fled. Anthony Hughes was ultimately given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 16 years. In 2031, when he will be 72 years old, Anthony is currently serving his sentence in prison. However, he still maintains his innocence and says he was wrongfully convicted. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a girl named Marie was born into an ordinary Filipino family. Concerned about her future, Marie's mother decided to send her to the United States, hoping her daughter would have a better chance at success. Marie was eventually adopted by an American military family who already had a daughter named Esther. The two girls, close in age, quickly became friends, unaware of their true relationship. Marie lived in a foster home, not knowing that her American father was her biological father. Meanwhile, Esther, the friend with whom Marie shared her games, secrets, and dreams, was actually her biological sister. Neither of them realized their blood relationship. As the two girls grew up, they decided to leave their parents' home to start a new life together in Florida. They rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club, which quickly became their favorite SPO. Marie Carlson had an optimistic outlook on life. She loved the color pink and often used the word beautiful as a guiding principle. In Marie's beautiful world, a new meaning suddenly appeared. It was love. Marie entered a new chapter in her life when she met Jeff. They quickly fell in love, started dating, and eventually got married. Their love was symbolized by the birth of a beautiful daughter, named Paris, reflecting the love and beauty they shared. However, Jeff remained a mysterious man, with a past and family members that Marie knew nothing about. While Marie's personal life was going smoothly, she set a lofty career goal of working for the FBI. To prepare for this challenging job, she began studying criminal law. However, her path to pursuing her dream was fraught with difficulties. Every step forward in her career required great effort. In the end, despite her best efforts, Marie left the police force without accomplishing her original goal. Marie's life, which had been happy before, gradually became difficult due to a mental disorder. The root cause was severe sexual abuse she had suffered since childhood, leaving deep psychological trauma. Over time, the mental disorder became more severe, making Marie's daily life a painful ordeal. The trauma of the past had a serious impact on Marie. It not only made her lose her self-esteem but also weakened her feelings for her husband, Jeff. Their once passionate love had cooled down and was filled with disappointment. Unable to overcome the difficulties in their marriage, they decided to divorce, feeling exhausted by the pain they had gone through. The divorce, the failure of her police career, and unsuccessful attempts to find a new job took a toll on Marie. She realized that she could no longer be a good mother to her daughter. To protect Paris from the negative environment, Marie and Jeff, who cared deeply for their daughter, agreed that Jeff would have custody of her. Despite their difficult past, the divorced couple completed their divorce smoothly. Despite the lengthy legal process, both of them tried their best for their little daughter, Paris. The divorce did not cause a rift between Jeff and Marie. They remained friends, and Jeff was always there to support Marie when needed. Marie also tried to see her daughter as often as possible and never missed her birthday. Marie was searching for meaning in life. Despite the hardships she went through, she did not give up. One day, she realized that she needed faith. Marie began attending the Emerald Coast Church founded by James Flanders. From the very first words of his simple and sincere sermon, she felt welcomed and loved. Marie began her new journey in Redemption, a town in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. James and James's colleague, Tanya Flanders, were two kind people who spread warmth to everyone around them with their kindness. They built a church called the Shrine of Mercy, where people could seek help and support. One day, they helped Marie, who was having a hard time in life. For Marie, the church was not only a place of prayer but also became her real home. This place was filled with love, and people were always willing to help each other. Marie found a new family, surrounded by warm affection. She felt free like a bird that had just escaped from a cage. As the days passed, Marie gradually regained her joy in life. Her heart was filled with happiness, and a smile was always on her lips. Marie's eyes shone with new hope, reflecting not only the gentle Florida sunshine. Her health and weight improved, and her soul was filled with happiness. The church was not only a place of worship but also a caring community. Here, Marie found a second family full of love, light, and faith. On the outside, the church looked simple and humble, blending in with other urban structures. Inside, the space was cozy with simple pews. Here, time seemed to stand still, and people were united by their common faith. But, one day, Marie was pregnant. A secret she kept hidden under her loose-fitting dress. She felt ashamed and afraid, sharing it only with a few of her closest friends. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. The news quickly spread throughout the small town. The truth about the child's father turned out to be heartbreaking. It was a man Marie had dated for a short time. He had abused her physically and mentally. When he learned that Marie was pregnant, he left without saying goodbye. After experiencing the deep trauma of abandonment, Marie found comfort and new hope in the church. There, she always received strong support. The Flanders family became loyal protectors, surrounding Marie and her young daughter Grace with care and love. They became the real family Marie had always dreamed of. She realized that she was no longer alone. After 3 months since Marie had given birth to her daughter. This should have been a time filled with joy and happiness, but Marie made a shocking decision. She posted a surprise announcement on social media: she was leaving. Not just leaving, Marie decided to cut all ties, leaving behind the city, family, and friends. Marie kept her plans a secret, not wanting anyone to doubt or interfere. She only casually mentioned her dream and expressed her feelings to her family, as if saying goodbye forever. No one knew where she was going or what she was doing. She suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving her family extremely worried and desperate. They did not know what to do to find her. Marie's mysterious disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was worried when his ex-wife went missing. He decided to call the police to look for her. As each day passed, the fear of Marie's fate increased. While everyone was still talking about Marie's disappearance from Fort Walton Beach, a terrifying truth was revealed: she had left without taking her 3-month-old daughter. Marie's sister Esther immediately became suspicious. "It's not like her at all," she said, her voice shaking. She was always protective of her child. Everyone who knew Marie was shocked. She was a model mother, always tenderly caring for 7-year-old Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was also surprised to learn that she had stopped caring to Paris. The police could not ignore the incident. When they examined Marie's recent messages, they discovered something unusual. Her writing style was very different from her previous ones. This made them suspect that Marie might have been coerced or that someone was impersonating her. An investigation was launched. Suspicions arose about the ex-boyfriend of her, due to Marie's relationship with this man seemed to be bad. Marie's disappearance remains a mystery. Even Marie's sister Esther has been unable to confirm or deny theories about the case. Police are investigating many complex aspects, including Marie's disappearance, strange text messages, and questions about ex-boyfriend of her. In INT reviews with the police, Tanya and James Flanders provided additional information. They said Marie had gone missing before, often leaving for periods of time and returning without explanation. The family also revealed that Marie suffered from bipolar disorder, which may have caused her sudden mood swings. A few weeks before her disappearance, Marie had fallen into a state of depression. She had started taking medication but had to stop because she was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Marie asked the Flanders to look after her daughter. After lunch, Marie went to rest, while Tanya and Grace went shopping. James came to look after Marie, but when he came, Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders immediately began searching. They searched the streets and checked the parking lots of every building. James suddenly had the idea to check the airport. To his surprise, they found Marie's car there. James drove home with the spare key. The investigators immediately checked the car, but FO. No traces or suspicious evidence. In search of new information, they decided to go to the airport where Marie had left. Their plan was to review the security camera footage in the parking lot. The airport was responsible for storing this information. If they were lucky, they might find Marie's plane ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. Although they found Marie's ticket, it was of no help to the investigation because there were no important traces on it. Marie's search efforts at the airport did not yield the expected results. A search of her car also turned up no clues, and the parking ticket had no fingerprints. Additionally, the security cameras in the parking lot were not working on the day Marie went missing, making the situation even more difficult. The police are focusing on the mysterious man who is the ex-boyfriend of Marie. Investigators returned to the church in the hope of finding clues about the father's identity and role in this complicated case. The church is abuzz with speculation about where Marie sought solace in the past. Parishioners have revealed Marie's dealing with her grief. She was struggling with depression and considering abortion. However, the Flanders were against the decision. They asked Marie to keep the baby and promised to help her. The Flanders' eldest child was grown, but they were desperate for another child. Even though they were in their 40s, they were still eager for the chance to become parents again. Once again, a parishioner declared Grace a gift from heaven and was a reward for the Flanders' kindness in helping Marie. Then, Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, appeared. Although he was not the baby's father, he held an important clue. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie was pregnant. When asked about the baby's father, Marie lied and said she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. So who really was Grace's father? As the investigation deepened, investigators interviewed Tanya's close friends, who were also members of the church, to learn more about the case. Initially, these friends promised Marie to keep the information confidential, but eventually, all the women were forced to reveal the truth. They all confirmed that James was Grace's biological father. It turned out to be a natural pregnancy, and James' wife, Tanya, had to accept the situation silently. This attracted the attention of investigators, leading to the Flanders family being called in for further questioning. Only Tanya appeared and confirmed the information, revealing that she had been in the room when the incident occurred. She described it as having happened with the consent of all parties involved. Tanya emphasized that the important thing in this situation was the relationship between people and higher goals, not the physical aspect. After Marie's disappearance, more terrifying information about the relationship between her, James, and Tanya gradually emerged. In fact, James not only had an affair but also had a parallel relationship with both women, similar to a form of polygamy. Once, they even celebrated the child's birthday together and took a photo, in which James, Tanya, and Marie posed as a happy family. This photo was intended to prove that the ceremony was only to honor Tanya, not related to Marie. However, after investigation and interviews with Tanya's friends, new information came to light that clarified the situation. Although Tanya said Marie was satisfied with her current relationship, the reality changed after Grace was born. Marie's maternal feelings rose strongly, making it impossible for her to easily give up her daughter. According to Marie's friends, she began to be jealous of Tanya. They suspected that Marie did not want to give Grace to Tanya and intended to win James back. These accusations immediately made Tanya the prime suspect. If Marie disappeared, all of Tanya's problems would be solved. She would have the chance to raise Grace alone and continue to be James' beloved wife. It has been 2 months since Marie went missing, but no more clues have been found. Investigators have used many methods, including GPS, to find her. However, in 2011, GPS technology was not yet fully developed, so they had to rely heavily on call and text data from mobile phones. The only thing they know for sure is that Marie was at the airport with James, but not Tanya. Later, Jason, a young priest, came to the police station. He had spoken on behalf of James many times, and one day he decided to speak directly to the investigators. Jason recounted a conversation he had overheard. Shortly after Marie's disappearance, James expressed his sadness and concern. He said that he would have to leave the country because of Marie's disappearance but could not reveal the details. James only mentioned that something terrible had happened during the time when Marie was severely depressed. During that period, James stayed with Marie at the clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily replaced him. Rumors of Pastor James' illicit relationship spread among the parishioners, and Jason was shocked to learn about James' polygamy. Jason directly asked him about his relationship with Marie. James frankly admitted that he had had sex with both Marie and his wife. James said that he and Marie had argued and fought shortly before she went missing, but he insisted that Marie was still alive when she disappeared. After this conversation, James decided to resign from his pastoral duties and quickly left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Recently, Marie's family contacted the Flanders family to retrieve some of her belongings. As a result, investigators seized Marie's phone, which may have contained important information. Although most of the data had been deleted, some of it was recovered. They also found a video of James advertising precious metals on the phone, which aroused the investigators' suspicions. In 2011, committing a crime was easier than it is today. Surveillance cameras were not common, and digital traces could quickly disappear. DNA detection technology was just beginning to develop, making it easier for criminals to get away with their crimes. However, thanks to the development of digital forensics, this case may be solved. 3 years after Marie's disappearance, new software was developed that could recover data from phones and computers. Thanks to this, it was possible to recover messages between Marie and James. These messages showed a completely different side of James. The couple exchanged sensitive pictures, even taken in church. In a final email to James, Marie expressed her desire to leave Fort Walton Beach and not leave her child in what she called a cursed place. The secrets that the Flanders family had kept for so long were exposed. In desperation, James and his lawyer decided to take their last chance. They proposed a deal. If James revealed the location of the victim's body, he would only be charged with manslaughter, which carries a lighter sentence. Marie's family, after years of pain and suffering, agreed to the deal. They just wanted to know the truth and find peace of mind. James shares details about his relationship with Marie and the hardships they went through. Marie suffered from depression, which caused many arguments between them. During one argument, Marie pushed James, and when he tried to calm her down, she accidentally fell to the ground and lost consciousness. This was a fateful moment in their lives. James realized the seriousness of the situation when Marie's heart stopped beating. Although he tried to save her, Marie eventually passed away. This incident left James with deep remorse and regret. After years of fruitless searching, investigators finally found Marie's body in James Flanders' yard. The body was wrapped in a blanket and buried 5 feet underground, only discovered when James showed them the exact location. The discovery shocked everyone involved in the case. James Flanders was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, was apparently unaware of her husband's crimes and was in complete shock at Marie's death. This was confirmed by a witness, who was later revealed to be the Flanders family's lawyer. Had Marie's body been discovered earlier, experts could have determined the cause of death, which could have affected the investigation. After 5 years, Marie was finally laid to rest at her funeral. It is possible that her sister Esther sang a farewell song for her. However, the fate of little Grace remains a mystery. Currently, Grace lives with her foster mother, Tanya Flanders, in Arizona. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne Baldelli, born Fold, was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in sunny Southern California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold and grew up with her brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she developed a particularly close relationship from an early age. When Yvonne was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried Leland F.A., and the grown children developed a wonderful relationship with their stepmother, who was a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Yvonne received a solid education and explored many career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She had been married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. Additionally, a surgery she underwent as a young woman, followed by complications, left Yvonne unable to have children. After her divorce from her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Yvonne lived alone in her small apartment with her dog, whom she affectionately called Baby. She kept in regular contact with her father and sister, calling them almost every day and trying to see her family at least once a month. In 2009, as Yvonne was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At the time, he was legally married and had a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open about his extramarital affair and shared with Yvonne that he was unhappy in his marriage, claiming that he had not filed for divorce only because he did not want to hurt his child. Yvonne fell in love with this handsome, tanned, healthy man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself and knowing how difficult it is to leave such a relationship, she did not push her partner, believing that the presence of a child was the main obstacle. However, Brian was not as straightforward and sincere as he seemed. From a young age, his attractive appearance made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was used to juggling several relationships at once and skillfully deceived the women who fell in love with him, promising each of them marriage, a family, and eternal love. It was soon discovered that the married Brian had not only met Yvonne but had also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a gorgeous blonde with many connections. She was a White House analyst. When Yvonne learned about another rival, she decided to tackle the situation directly and fight for the man she loved. Summoning her courage, she contacted Brian's wife to reveal that he was cheating on her with 2 women. This revelation caused a heated debate, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Yvonne, though it's possible she influenced his choice. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Yvonne. At that time, He was still in the Marines but had been thinking about leaving his military career. The couple appeared genuinely happy, but Yvonne's family remained skeptical of Brian, questioning the sincerity of his feelings. In the summer of 2011, Brian expressed his desire to make significant changes in his life. He wanted to leave the military, move away from the busy city, and settle on a tropical island. Yvonne felt the same way. She supported him completely and was ready to go wherever he chose. She believed he was the most important person in her life and loved him deeply. By September of that year, they had made their decision. The couple would move to Panama and live on the small island of Carino, which they considered a true paradise. Yvonne told her family about her plans just before leaving, so they didn't have a chance to convince her to change her mind. She sold her apartment, quit her job, and began packing for the trip. Yvonne packed only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, aiming to start a small boutique where she could create and sell custom outfits for tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Yvonne, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a few days in the capital before taking a ferry to Carino Island, where they rented a house right by the ocean. The climate was hot and humid, with consistent temperatures year-round, which attracted many tourists, especially those interested in diving and surfing. The island was only 1 square kilometer in size, allowing visitors to walk around it in about an hour. Most of the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior consisted of dense jungle and swampy areas filled with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it dangerous to explore. Brian, a talented guitar player since he was young, brought his guitar hoping to start a musical career by performing in local entertainment venues on the island. Within a week of moving, he had contacted with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a job. He performed in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his audience often bought him drinks, which led him to drink heavily almost every day. Yvonne's business was growing very slowly, facing poor sales and making little profit. Nevertheless, she remained determined. She took a job at one of the bars and adopted a second dog she found on the island. Yvonne communicated with her sister, Michelle, almost every day, sharing updates, but her messages became shorter and more gloomy, causing concern for her family. The couple initially enjoyed their first few months on the island, feeling like they were in paradise. Yvonne dreamed that Brian would propose and they would have a romantic wedding by the ocean. However, as time went on, Brian didn't seem eager to get married, and their relationship began to decline. By early December, Michelle noticed that Yvonne had stopped messaging her, which made her worry. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle to ask when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her family garage before going to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant that Brian was back in the US and wanted to pick up his car. She wondered where Yvonne was and why she hadn't returned or even contacted her. Brian said he had detailed everything in an email sent a few days ago. He also said that his ex-girlfriend had supposedly messaged Yvonne about the situation. Michelle looked at her messages but found nothing, so she checked her email. She discovered 2 unread messages, one from her younger sister and another from him. In his messages, Brian stated that Yvonne had left him, running away to Costa Rica with a new lover. Another message, purportedly from Yvonne, claimed that she had left Brian after discovering his affair and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. The message ended with her stating that she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine, with whom he had been involved for a long time and who was pregnant with his child when he and Yvonne flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed reasonable, especially since Yvonne was unable to have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else would have been extremely distressing for her. However, Yvonne was not known for acting impulsively, and she would certainly have called her younger sister to discuss such a major change in her life. Furthermore, the tone of the message purportedly from Yvonne was somewhat strange and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle attempted to determine her younger sister's current whereabouts, she was unable to obtain any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and incoming messages were brief and discreet, stating things like, "I'm fine, I need time," and "I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian file a missing persons report. Brian appeared concerned but insisted that it was unnecessary, asserting that Yvonne was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to return home. Although Brian was reluctant to even discuss the matter and hurriedly left after getting the car, a message from Yvonne's phone soon arrived, stating that she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message relieved Michelle, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping that Yvonne would return as stated in the message. By mid-January, not only had Yvonne not returned home, but she had also not called once during that time, and her messages had stopped altogether. Furthermore, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had married Christine just before New Year's, which seemed very strange since he had broken up with his ex-girlfriend just weeks before the celebration. Worried, Michelle eventually went to the police department and reported her younger sister missing, suspecting that Yvonne had not gone to Costa Rica. An official investigation sent to Panama, the results showed that Yvonne had not left the country. Michelle then asked her cousin, a programmer, to help track down the IP address from which Yvonne had sent the messages, determining their true origin. It turned out that the emails purportedly sent by Yvonne from Costa Rica in December were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was staying. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation became increasingly alarming, Michelle rushed to inform the police of her discovery. Michelle contacted the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her younger sister in Panama and then continued to send text messages and emails from her phone, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue to gather evidence of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Yvonne. He promised Christine that he would return soon, that they would marry, and that they would raise their daughter together. Furthermore, Christine did not know that Brian had come to the island with Yvonne, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's investigation began 2 months after Yvonne's disappearance when her sister and niece flew to Panama themselves. There, they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and Brian's version of events. After listening to them, Don immediately expressed concern that the possibility of Yvonne being alive was very low. With extensive experience in such investigations and leveraging her connections, Don decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was held with the participation of Yvonne's family members. Later, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other close relatives and friends traveled to Panama to join the search and assist in the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Carino, searched thoroughly, but found no trace of Yvonne. Their search efforts were hampered by dense bushes and swamps filled with wild animals. In addition, the family asked the islanders how well they knew Brian and Yvonne and what they could tell them. It turned out that the couple had been drinking heavily recently and often argued loudly, disregarding those around them. They were seen at the bar almost every day, drinking and arguing violently. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body. She hardly ever took off her sunglasses, apparently to hide the bruises under her eyes. The couple's landlord confirmed that neighbors frequently complained about noise, screaming, and swearing coming from their residence. At the same time, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to search for any potential evidence or remains of her. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. Brian was initially the prime suspect in the case, but there was no concrete evidence to charge him. He denied any involvement, repeatedly telling the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It was not until September 21, 2012, that Brian was questioned and his home searched. At the time, his wife, Christine, was at work while Brian, unemployed, stayed home with the children and immersed in his beloved game of golf. Initially, he appeared confident, recalling that Yvonne had left him after discovering his child with another woman. However, he became visibly concerned, and the police mentioned that the last messages sent under Yvonne's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his desk. The confiscated laptop turned out to be Yvonne's, with messages sent from it after she had supposedly fled. A photo of Yvonne with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November in which Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and the shared custody of their daughter, which is probably how Yvonne learned about them. Furthermore, the laptop search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were important but circumstantial, as no body or mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had sent messages impersonating Yvonne did not conclusively prove his guilt. Don soon discovered that before leaving Panama, Brian had sold a machete he owned. In an online chat with a potential buyer, he joked that he had only used the weapon once, to finish off a stripper. The prank was so creepy that authorities tracked down the machete's new owner and confiscated the blade for testing, which initially yielded no reliable results. The long-awaited arrest came when police overlooked another crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card. Brian had used the card after she disappeared to add credibility to his story. Before returning to the United States, he decided to take a trip to Costa Rica and used her card multiple times, creating the illusion that she had actually fled to that country. He paid for his ticket in cash and withdrew money from various locations in San Jose, emptying the card before discarding it. Brian had no idea, however, that he had been caught on surveillance cameras at ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after Yvonne disappeared, her relatives, along with evidence collected by the police, FBI, and Don Winter, succeeded in getting Brian arrested. He was initially charged with making false statements and obstructing the investigation due to a lack of stronger evidence at that time. At that point, Brian had recently become a father for the second time, as Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to have an honest conversation with Brian, hoping he would confess to the crime and reveal where the body was, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. His lawyer argued that there was no body and no direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance. 2 months after Brian's arrest, investigators made a shocking discovery in the swamp that significantly advanced the case. On Canaro Island, a worker exploring a shortcut accidentally stumbled upon a partially submerged army backpack in the murky underbrush. Out of curiosity, he opened the bag and was horrified to find a human skull inside. He promptly reported the discovery to the police, who arrived to collect the backpack for further examination. Inside, they found dismembered human remains along with the bodies of 2 small dogs. The remains had been cut into pieces, placed in the bag, and hidden in a spot where they were unlikely to be discovered. DNA tests confirmed that the human remains were those of Yvonne, though some body parts were missing. Pathologists revealed that she had suffered severe trauma prior to her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The presence of the dogs suggested a calculated effort to support the narrative, as it seemed unlikely that Yvonne would abandon her beloved pets, implying that they were also killed and buried alongside her. The chop marks on the victim's bones matched the blade of a machete, confirming that the body had been dismembered with this one. Each machete blade has a unique pattern, similar to a fingerprint. As a result of this evidence, Brian was officially charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In early 2014, Michelle was diagnosed with advanced aggressive cancer. She had been so focused on investigating her younger sister's case that she neglected her own health and put off doctor visits. After 6 months of intensive treatment that didn't work, she chose to spend her remaining time fighting for justice for her sister. In September 2014, doctors informed Michelle that she had only a few weeks to live. Despite her illness, she vowed to continue advocating for her sister until her last moments. She decided to testify in front of Brian, sharing everything she knew and providing all correspondence with Yvonne to the court. She carefully recounted Brian's actions following her sister's disappearance, but then fainted from exhaustion. Michelle died 3 days later. The prosecution contended that on the night of November 26, after another argument with Yvonne over Brian's messages to Christine, Brian, fueled by anger and alcohol, attacked Yvonne and fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub with a machete, using the same weapon to kill Yvonne's dogs, and placed their remains in his military backpack. The limbs that couldn't fit in the bag were discarded in the ocean, thrown off a rocky cliff early in the morning, along with a blood-stained mattress. Brian then carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the following weeks, he stayed in the same coastal house, carefully removing any traces of the crime. He told the locals a convincing story about his girlfriend leaving him for another man, which led them to sympathize with him. He even found a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until he left for the U.S. During the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of dishonesty and being cruel. With strong evidence against him, Brian admitted his guilt but argued it was in self-defense, claiming that Yvonne had attacked him first with a knife, which he then used to defend himself. He stated that everything that happened afterward was due to shock, insisting he didn't remember dismembering her body or handling the dogs. However, his internet searches and efforts to destroy evidence showed that he was fully aware of his actions and tried to create a false narrative to explain Yvonne's disappearance. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and received a 26-year prison sentence, with the chance for parole in 2035. His prior service in the Marines was taken into account during sentencing, which helped him avoid a life sentence. Additionally, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, expressed her belief in his innocence and her unwavering support for him. The tragic case of Yvonne Baldelli highlights not only the devastating impact of domestic violence and deceit but also the tireless pursuit of justice by her family. Despite the initial fog of lies and misdirection, the truth ultimately emerged, revealing a chilling narrative of betrayal and loss. Yvonne's story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance and support for those in perilous situations, urging us to seek justice for victims and ensure that their voices are never silenced. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jock Waller. June 1, 2011 marked a turning point in the life of the Jock Waller family. That day, Jock called her sister Cheryl to say that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay Waller and would be home later. However, Jock never returned and did not call back. After trying to contact her sister without success, Cheryl became increasingly worried. To address her concerns, she drove to the police station around 7 p.m. At the station, Cheryl announced that Clay Waller had killed younger sister. It was a shocking statement for all the police, as Jock had only called Cheryl a few hours earlier and there was no reason to be alarmed and assume that she was in trouble. But it turned out that Cheryl's hunch was correct, and her sister Jock was indeed caught up in a macabre story. So what happened to Jock, and what made Cheryl really believe that Clay Waller had killed her sister even before Jock was reported missing? Jock was a sweet, kind, and caring girl when she met Clay, and they hit it off. Clay had a stutter that caused some people to make fun of him, which made him feel self-conscious. Jock, however, was different. She never made fun of him and always protected him, making sure he didn't get hurt. That was her nature. She protected the vulnerable, fought against injustice, and helped people. As their love blossomed, Jock and Clay became closer and eventually married when they were in their 30s. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, and Jock was building a family there. Jock had a successful career, unlike her husband, whose life was constantly failing and couldn't stay in one place for long. As a result, Jock was the sole provider for the family. She had always dreamed of having children, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She was even more delighted to learn that she would be having triplets. The couple welcomed 2 daughters, Avery and Addison, and a son named Maddox. Caring for 3 newborns at once was a huge challenge for Jock, but she did not complain. Instead, she took on the responsibility alone, as her husband seemed indifferent to the children. Clay took a job at the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife took care of the children, but he did not stay long. He was fired after a year, and during that time, only Jock's parents and sister helped her with the children so she could rest. After Clay lost her job, Jock began working to support the family. Despite having a child, Clay did not change his habits and showed little interest in his family or his job. Occasionally, he took on a part-time job, but it did not bring in the income they needed. He seemed content to live off Jock, who worked 40 hours a week while still caring for the children. Jock's career took off, leading her to a management position at an insurance company. However, this success only made her husband more comfortable, and he decided not to worry about money anymore. Instead of appreciating his wife, Clay abused her in every way possible. He insulted her, called her worthless, and told her that no one wanted her. He had affairs with other women. Jock's parents and sister were extremely outraged by her husband's behavior and convinced her to divorce him. However, at that time, Jock was not ready for such an extreme choice and tried to keep her family together. Every day, any hope of saving her marriage went up in smoke before her eyes. A few years later, the couple began to have problems. They were in financial trouble because her husband was not working and Jock's salary was not enough to support their growing family. The mortgage debts kept mounting and they were in danger of losing their home. Jock decided to move in with her sister, while her husband stayed with a friend. By this time, the children were a little older and Jock made the difficult but necessary decision for herself to get a divorce because she felt that she and the children deserved a better life. She talked to her husband about it and at first, Clay took the news calmly. However, he later changed his mind and refused to divorce. Clay began to threaten Jock. At first, the threats were indirect and vague, but eventually, he directly threatened her life, claiming that divorcing him would be a death sentence for her and the children. This scared Jock, but she did not give up on her decision. She could not continue living this way and sought to distance herself from her husband. Jock confided in her family about Clay's behavior and kept a diary of his disturbing actions. She also noted that her husband had been following her. At the time, Jock and the children were staying with her sister. The children, who were only 5 years old, did not understand the situation, but Jock explained that it was necessary. Eventually, things began to return to normal and the divorce proceedings were almost complete. Clay seemed to have accepted the divorce and stopped bothering Jock. The two began to move forward and began to build a new relationship. Jock allowed her husband to visit the children and they stopped arguing. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jock scheduled a meeting at the lawyer's office to discuss the final important details of the divorce. That day, their son Maddox was with his father, while the other children were at Jock's sister Cheryl's house. After the meeting, Jock planned to pick up her son. When she left the office, she called her sister Cheryl and told her everything had gone well. She drove to Clay's house to pick up her son and then made plans to return to her sister's house. That was their last conversation. Jacques, 39, never heard from her again. Over time, Cheryl grew worried and started calling Jacques, but she didn't answer. Cheryl then tried calling Clay, but he didn't answer either. Cheryl suspected that Clay might have done something to Jacques, so she texted him, "If I don't hear from Jacques in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." Clay immediately called her back, asking what was wrong. Cheryl replied that he knew exactly what she meant. But Clay insisted that he did not know where Jacques was and promised to tell her to call Cheryl back when he saw her. Doubting him, Cheryl took younger sister children to her parents' house and filed a police report herself. The police were wary of Cheryl's claim that Clay was involved in her sister's disappearance, but did not send her home to wait for 24 hours to pass. Instead, they quickly decided to contact Clay to find out if there was any clue as to Jacques' whereabouts. They called Clay, and he said that he had lunch with Jacques. He said that they had met at the lawyer's office to discuss some aspects of the divorce and then drove to his house to talk further. He said they had a chat and then he went to the store. When he returned, Jacques' car was gone and he assumed that she had left. According to Clay, their son Maddox was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and Jacques knew this and was not concerned about their son. He insisted that she had come to his house just to talk, not for their son. Clay's words seemed hard to believe. Jacques had made it clear to her sister that she had come to Clay's house for her son. She had no intention of discussing anything with him, especially since she would not allow her son to be with another woman so far away. She would have been furious with Clay in that situation. Cheryl did not believe the story. She convinced the police that Clay was lying and hiding something, and that things were indeed serious. Jacques and her car were reported missing, and a massive search began. Hours later, Jacques' car, a Honda Pilot, was found on the interstate with flat tires. It was no accident. The tires had been deliberately punctured and looked like they had been set up. The car was found open and empty, with some blood on the back seat, but there were no clues to Jacques' whereabouts. It seemed increasingly likely that she had been attacked and kidnapped. The search for Jacques focused on that area, with many volunteers working alongside police and rescue dogs. Despite the unbearable heat, people were eager to help. The family offered a $3,500 reward for any information about Jacques' whereabouts. Despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful. The police began to focus more on her ex-husband, Clay. They went to his house to talk to him again, but Clay repeated the same story. When police asked to search his home and car, Clay refused and immediately hired a lawyer to defend his rights. For days after she disappeared, Clay left his wife a tearful voicemail, "Hi honey, it's Sunday. I went missing on Wednesday. Please, if you get this message, call me. I don't know where you are and I miss you so much. Please call me." The police then obtained a search warrant and returned to his home. While examining the car, they discovered stains that looked like blood. The forensic team collected samples and sent them for testing, which showed that they were fish blood. It turned out that Clay had intentionally covered the car with fish blood to throw the forensic experts off. When the house was inspected, it was noticed that the floor had no carpet. A section of the floor had been cut out, leaving a noticeable mark. Small drops of blood were found on the basement hallway wall. There were signs that furniture had been moved. Something unusual was going on in the house. The forensic team checked under the floor and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood and carpet samples were sent to the lab for analysis. The police tracked Jacques' last movements. At 1:10 a.m., she was seen at a pharmacy with her ex-husband. They appeared to be normal. 2 hours later, Jacques was caught on camera. ATM security recorded the withdrawal. Jacques did not appear on the surveillance camera afterward, while Clay did. Hours later, Clay, his son, and his new girlfriend went to a toy store. They then went to a car wash in his pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. Clay changed clothes and washed the car and boat. Suspicion grew around Clay, and he became the prime suspect. Police released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, asking any witnesses who saw them to come forward. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River, which was later confirmed by Clay's cell phone records. This prompted police to conduct a search of the area, but despite their efforts, nothing was found. At that time, forensic testing revealed that drops of blood found in Clay's home matched those of the missing woman, Jock. Based on this evidence, the police suspected that Jock was likely dead. The police brought Clay in for questioning and attempted to get him to confess to the murder. However, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing, instead claiming that it was old blood from a domestic violence incident in the kitchen. Without a body, the police could not arrest a suspect and charge him. They released Clay but continued to monitor and investigate him. Clay, who had worked as a deputy sheriff, knew full well that the police were watching him, and he played a cat-and-mouse game with them. He would go to deserted vacant lots to disrupt the investigation while the entire neighborhood was involved in the search for Jock, the missing mother of 3 children. Clay continued to harass the search party and Jock's family. He drove by, insulting them and yelling that they were wasting their time, claiming that they wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more and more suspicions. Meanwhile, Jock's sister, Cheryl, sought custody of the triplets, fearing for their safety as Clay was their father. Clay's erratic behavior eventually led to Cheryl gaining custody, which angered him even more. He began threatening Cheryl with violence, even posting about it on social media. Cheryl recorded these threats and reported them to the police. Nearly 5 months after Jock's disappearance, police arrested Clay and charged him with making threats to death. Although he admitted to the charges, Clay claimed he acted out of anger and despair over losing custody of the children, with no intention of harming Cheryl. He believes he is the victim in this situation. During the investigation, police discover that Clay is being accused of stealing $50,000 from a previous company and stalking a man. Despite this, Clay denies any involvement in Jock's disappearance. When questioned, Clay claims that Jock's new lover, Harry, is responsible for her death. However, police investigate Harry and discover that he has a solid alibi, eliminating him as a suspect. The evidence points to Clay, but he continues to deny any wrongdoing. He is eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for threatening his wife's sister, Cheryl. Police continue to investigate Jock's disappearance, searching Devil's Island but finding no trace of her. 2 years after her disappearance, police had gathered enough circumstantial evidence, including video footage and blood found in Clay's home, to charge him with Jock's murder, even though her body had never been found. It was a risky move, because if they lost, the DA's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. Clay, after consulting with his attorney, made a deal with the prosecutor to reduce his sentence. Clay offered to plead guilty to murder and provide a burial site. Jock's family agreed to the deal because it was important to find her body and give her a proper burial. Clay led police to his ex-wife's burial site. It was located in a remote location on a sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. The initial investigation was hampered because Clay could not remember the exact tree in which he had buried Jock's body. However, he eventually revealed that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her grave. A gardener pointed out that large amounts of fertilizer could kill trees, leading the police to focus on 3 dead trees in the area. When they dug up the grave, they found Jock's body under one of the trees, wearing the same clothes she had last worn. The woman was identified from dental records as Jock Waller. The discovery of Jock's body brought closure to her loved ones, who were finally able to hold a funeral for her. Ironically, the ceremony was held on her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. At this time, Cheryl had to tell her children that their mother had died and that their father was responsible for her death. This revelation was devastating to the children, who not only lost their mother, but also their relationship with their father. The children immediately shunned Clay and refused to communicate with him. As part of his plea agreement, Clay was required to provide a detailed confession of his crimes. According to his statement, he began thinking about murder a year before Jock died, after she announced that she wanted to end their relationship. Despite these dark thoughts, he initially pushed them aside because Jock was the mother of his children. Clay felt he couldn't let Jock take his children. He had warned her earlier that if she continued to do so, things would not end well for her, but she chose to ignore him. The night before the murder, he had dug a grave for Jock on Devil's Island. It was then that he began to consider taking her life. At the time, their divorce seemed to be going smoothly. After visiting a lawyer, the couple had a conversation in which Jock suggested they have one last intimate encounter together. They went to his house, where they continued the conversation in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator to find a snack. When he raised his head, he accidentally hit Jock on the head, causing her nose to bleed. This enraged her, and she stormed out into the hallway. She began screaming that he would never see their children again. This was Clay's breaking point. In a fit of rage, he punched her in the face and then strangled her. After the fight, he dumped Jock's body in a prepared grave on Devil's Island. He then cleaned up the crime scene by washing his car, cleaning the house, and showering. He changed into new clothes and attempted to resume his normal routine by meeting his new girlfriend and son at a toy store, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Clay claimed the murder was an impulsive act driven by emotion, contradicting his earlier statement about digging the grave the day before. This inconsistency raised suspicions of premeditated murder. The medical examiner's report showed that the victim had suffered multiple skull fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma rather than a simple fight. Clay's initial story was not believed. Clay seemed content with his 20-year sentence for second-degree murder, showing no remorse for killing his ex-wife Jock. However, the prosecution had a surprising twist. The hole he dug to bury Jock was in another state, Illinois, and the murder took place in Missouri. These features fall under federal laws against domestic violence across states, and he violated them. This allowed him to add 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. Clay had no idea that his confession would have serious consequences due to a federal law he was unaware of. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sion Kingi. Sion Kingi was born in New Zealand on December 16, 1974. When she was 7, her family moved to New Zealand, a small coastal town in Australia with a population of about 5,000. The area is known for its warm, pleasant climate. From a young age, Sion was a kind and gentle person who loved sports, particularly ballet and netball. Although she was naturally modest, she had a charming personality that made her popular among her peers. Sion was tall, had long blonde hair and striking eyes, which helped her stand out in school. Unfortunately, her beautiful appearance eventually led to serious consequences in her life. Friday, November 27, 1987, was an ordinary day. It was a beautiful sunny day. Typically, this time of year features perfect weather, warm sun and a cool breeze, so many locals were enjoying the beach. Sion's mother, Linda, went to the store to buy food and fabric to sew a lovely outfit for her daughter's upcoming birthday. After school, Sion got on her yellow bike, she knowing she was going to the store to help her mother Linda choose fabric. Linda wanted to select something Sion would love, so she headed to the store right after classes ended. Once they chose the fabric for the dress, they were only free in the afternoon. After making their purchases, Linda planned to stop by the bakery to buy some treats for dinner. Sion was already feeling tired and wanted to head home. She asked her mother if she could go home by herself first. Her mother agreed, and Sion rode her bike along her favorite shortcut. While she had taken this route many times before, it didn't feel as safe today. In the 1980s, Newzok was a peaceful small town where everyone knew each other, making it one of the safest places in the area. The Kingi family's home was only a few kilometers from the local store, they easily reachable by bike in just a few minutes. Linda felt secure allowing her 12-year-old daughter, Sion, to ride there alone, as nothing bad had ever happened in their quiet town. In fact, her mother would follow her right after buying a few things. At 4:45 p.m., Sion rode her bike toward home, taking a path that went through the park, while Linda drove a different route in her car. Since Sion wasn't biking too quickly, she and her mother were only a few minutes apart. Linda anticipated arriving home just after Sion. However, when returned, Linda found no one at home. Sion was not there, and her yellow bicycle was missing. Initially, Linda wasn't worried about Sion's absence. The girl might have met a friend or stopped by to visit someone, especially with the weekend approaching after a long school week. Teenagers often hang out after classes, and Sion had many friends, so it was normal for her to drop in on someone. Sion had just picked out a beautiful fabric with her mother, Linda, and she could have wanted to share her weekend plans with a friend, as they were also planning to meet up. However, Linda soon began to feel anxious. Sion was well-behaved and never stayed out long without permission. Then, Linda decided to call several of Sion's friends to check if she was with them. To her dismay, no one had seen Sion. By 8 p.m., Sion still hadn't returned home. Although they lived in a small, quiet town with little traffic, Sion always respected the curfew and never wandered outside after dark. On Friday evenings, people often relax and take walks after work. As darkness falls, even the safest towns can become risky. Linda recognized this, so she chose to walk the route that Sion typically took on her bike. This path was the quickest way from their home on the outskirts to the shops in the city. Linda and her husband walked together, and about halfway there, they discovered Sion's yellow bicycle abandoned, but they did not see the girl. The abandoned bike raised concerns, especially since it was Sion's first bike, one she had cherished and would never willingly leave behind. Unfortunately, they couldn't find Sion nearby. Her parents called for her, but there was no answer. They decided to head to the police station. Before leaving, they checked their house to see if Sion had returned and bring a picture of her. With the photo in hand, they went to meet the police. The officers took their report about Sion's disappearance and officially declared her missing. The community was tight-knit, and the city had an extremely low crime rate, so everyone believed Sion would be found quickly. This situation seems to stem from a simple misunderstanding. Sion might have been hanging out with friends or got lost while walking in the forest. However, one officer recalled that there had been a kidnapping in the area shortly before this incident. To address the situation, the police reached out to local media, as they did not have access to social networks or the internet at the time. The following morning, a report about Sion's disappearance was broadcasted, in hopes of finding witnesses who might have seen her the night before. Several people came to the police station with information, but they all insisted they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. These witnesses had seen Linda and Sion while they were picking out fabric for a dress, but none of them saw Sion on their way home, and no one was on the path at that time. The witnesses provided varying details and tried to highlight any unusual occurrences, such as strange cars or odd behavior from local residents. However, They saw that was watching Linda and Sion. A witness reported seeing a dirty white station wagon on the evening of the incident. When police were notified, they discovered the car contained a dark-haired man and a heavy-set woman. They seemed to be aimlessly driving around, possibly searching for someone. It's conceivable that Sion might have come into contact with them. Witnesses noticed this suspicious couple shortly before Sion went missing. The police working on the case noted there were approximately 170,000 station wagons in the area, with about 10,000 of them being white. As a result, the search area has been much wider. Investigators needed to examine all the cars in the region and pursue additional leads. Many police officers and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Friends, family, neighbors, and members of the community came together to assist in the search for Sion. Ground and air search teams were organized, and photographs of the location where Sion went missing were taken and shared with the media. This method is often used to help potential witnesses recall details about what happened that day. No one was able to provide useful information to the police at first. However, by Sunday, several new witnesses came forward and aided the investigation. The first witness was sunbathing by a stream in the forest when she was attacked by an unknown man. He harassed her and attempted to drag her into his car, which was identified as a white Kingwood station wagon. A second witness saw the incident and assisted the girl in fending off her attacker. Afterward, this witness followed the suspicious vehicle when the driver tried to flee the scene, but he eventually lost sight of them. He managed to give a detailed description of the car and provided the police with its license plate number, 429. The detectives decided to check the phone number associated with the car with that plate number. They found that this number was registered in the area. It belonged to a woman named Valmay Beck. The detectives quickly located her address and visited her home. A man answered the door and confirmed he knew Valmay. He explained that he was not her relative, but her stepson. He also added that her husband was Barry, and they had been married for a year. The description of Barry's closely matched the composite sketch created from the witness's account of the attack near the stream. The suspect's name was Barry Watts. However, the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him or accuse him of kidnapping Sion. Despite this, both Barry and Valmay were viewed as potential suspects in the case. Unfortunately, the man didn't know Barry and Valmay's whereabouts. They frequently moved and rented different places, which seemed suspicious. 3 days after Sion disappeared, another witness came forward with information. This witness also reported seeing a white Holden Kingwood near the creek and described the driver as athletic, mentioning a plump woman who was acting suspiciously. After conducting a background check on Barry and Valmay, the police discovered that both had recently been released from prison in Perth, Western Australia, right before Sion went missing. Both Barry and Valmay had extensive criminal records. Just weeks prior, they relocated to Queensland from Perth, pausing their criminal activities after serving their parole. They arrived in a sedan but quickly switched to a white station wagon, which had been linked to several suspicious incidents. The police recognized that they were dealing with dangerous individuals with a long history of armed robberies, break-ins, and forgery related to obtaining fraudulent documents. This was just a portion of Barry and Valmay's criminal history. This news was alarming for the Sion family. If their daughter, Sion, became involved with these individuals, her chances of being found alive and safe were slim. At the time, Barry was 33 years old, and Valmay was 43. Valmay had 6 children from previous relationships. Both police and Sion's family viewed Barry and Valmay as particularly dangerous criminal wanted. The authorities urgently needed to locate them to investigate their connection to Sion's disappearance. 6 days after Sion went missing, a man named Tim visited the police station to report bad news. He reported that the night before, as he was heading to work, he noticed a terrible, foul smell that initially made him think an animal had died nearby. On his way back, he felt compelled to check the area again and was hit by a strong smell of decay. At the side of the road near the stream, he discovered the body of a teenage girl. She was wearing a school uniform and had blonde hair. The police quickly arrived at the location provided by Tim and discovered the mutilated body of a schoolgirl. It was evident that she had been sexually assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, and her body had 12 stab wounds, 3 near her heart and 2 cuts on her throat. Additionally, her spine was broken, and her arms were so badly damaged they were nearly severed from her body. The level of violence indicated that her death was extremely painful. The police suspected that this victim was the missing girl, Sion. She was wearing the same clothes as described by Sion's mother. In the laboratory, a forensic expert confirmed that the victim was 12 years old Sion Kingi. 5 days after this gruesome discovery, family Sion's and friends came together to say their final goodbyes at her funeral. During the ceremony, a classmate read a passage from Peter Pan, suggesting that the girl would always be remembered. Flowers were placed along the route where the young girl had been found. Following media coverage of the incident, a nurse named Nicole Close contacted the police. She reported having seen some suspicious individuals in the area, they driving a white station wagon. One evening, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Nicole was walking through the parking lot to her car when she noticed a white car entering the lot and slowly approaching her. Sensing something was off, she quickly ran to her car, jumped inside, and locked the door. The station wagon did not back away but parked next to her passenger door. A man then got out and approached her window, asking for help with directions. Although he seemed calm and friendly, but she felt uneasy and wanted to end the conversation quickly. She noticed a suspicious-looking woman in the station wagon and thought she saw ropes in the back, which heightened her anxiety. The man continued to speak politely and stepping closer. Despite Nicole explaining the directions multiple times, he kept asking the same question and moved closer to her. Just as he was only a few steps away, Nicole spotted another man walking through the parking lot. The driver noticed him too, which distracted him and gave Nicole the chance to escape. She quickly backed into her car, locked the door, and drove away. Nicole recalled that this incident occurred on November 2nd, before Sion went missing. Investigators viewed the reports about the white car as significant and pursued this lead. Detectives showed Nicole a lineup of photographs featuring unfamiliar faces, and she clearly identified Barry and Valmay. But the testimonies didn't end there. The day after Nicole spoke to the police, another eyewitness came forward with information about a different attempted kidnapping. He reported seeing a man attack a woman on the street, holding a knife to her throat and trying to drag her into a white station wagon. The victim fought back, injuring the attacker's hand with his own knife, and managed to escape. Police then discovered fingerprints belonging to Barry on the woman's car. She also identified Barry and Valmay as likely involved in kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. The officers recognized that they were dealing with particularly dangerous criminals who posed a threat to the entire community. They issued descriptions of the suspects, Barry and Valmay, and their white car, making the information public through the media. Although it seemed the criminals were in hiding, but arrest warrants have been sent to police departments nationwide, indicating the possibility that they will be caught soon. In a small town, a local power grid worker was installing wiring when he spotted a car that matched the description of Barry and Valmay's station wagon. He remembered it because of a media alert he had seen a few days earlier. After coming down from his work, he was convinced that this was the car the police were looking for. He quickly went to the police station to mark the location on a map where he had seen the vehicle. When the patrol officers arrived, Barry and Valmay had already fled. Although the police tried to chase them, they lost track of Barry and Valmay once again. Later, the department received a tip about a money transfer made by Barry and Valmay as they were leaving New South Wales. The station wagon was tracked to a motel parking lot, and fortunately, it was still there when the police arrived. The hotel staff allowed the officers to access Barry and Valmay's room. Understanding that they were dealing with potentially armed and dangerous criminals, the officers prepared their weapons. To their surprise, Barry and Valmay did not put up a fight and were arrested in the motel room. The police discovered wigs, hair dye, and a hair clipper, suggesting that they was attempting to change their appearance to evade capture. The suspects, Barry and Valmay, were interrogated for about 12 hours, during which they remained completely silent. Barry did not cooperate at all. He informed the police that he had conspired with his wife, Valmay, to ensure she maintained the same story and did not reveal any important information. In contrast, Valmay quickly gave in. She thought that by doing so, she could reduce her sentence. What she revealed to the authorities was chilling. On November 27th, Valmay claimed that she and Barry were driving around the city in search of a new victim. Barry had an obsession with violence against women, particularly targeting those who were much younger than him. His wife, Valmay, being 10 years older, did not fit his preferences. To fulfill his disturbing desires, Barry started to rape and murder girls who fit his idea of youth and beauty. Valmay claimed she went along with his actions because she was afraid of losing him. On the morning of Sion's disappearance, they spent several hours driving around, believing that finding a girl would be easy. However, most of the girls were with others, making it difficult to kidnap someone discreetly. Barry attempted to approach a number of girls himself, but they managed to evade him. Eventually, he realized that he was not as trustworthy as his wife, so he decided to use Valmay as bait to attract the girls. They parked near a local park and got out of the car. While walking along the trail, they noticed a girl on a yellow bicycle. Barry selected her as his target, and Valmay pretended to be in distress, asking the girl for help because she was having trouble with her dog. Sion, a kind-hearted girl, came Valmay and engaging in conversation. At that moment, Barry attacked Sion from behind, muffling her screams and dragging her into his dirty car. Inside, he restrained her with tape. Valmay sat in a back seat with Sion, while Barry drove away. They traveled 12 kilometers from where the abduction occurred and stopped in a forest. There, Barry laid out a blanket and started raping Sion for several hours, fulfilling his twisted desires. Valmay later reported that Sion showed incredible courage throughout the process of being raped by Barry, she enduring the abuse without crying. She complied with Barry's demands, hoping her obedience would somehow spare her life and that they might let her go. However, from the start, Barry never planned to let her live. His intent was to satisfy his twisted fantasies. Barry started to strangle the Sion and stabbed her with a knife, causing fatal injuries. Throughout this horrific scene, Valmay watched without intervening. She later reported that the belt used for strangling Sion, along with the knife and other items, were discarded nearby in a stream. The police went to the specified location, and Valmay provided them with details about the crime scene. They were able to recover evidence, including light-colored hair that seemed to belong to Sion. Valmay's confession took up 28 pages, describing the terrible ordeal the young victim Sion endured before her death. Although Barry remained unyielding during the interrogation, he became enraged upon learning of his wife's confession, Valmay. To ensure Barry was convicted, investigators attempted to extract a confession from him. However, they were unable to do so. As a result, they decided to use a complex strategy. They planned to place an undercover agent in the temporary detention cell where Barry was held. This spy will spend time with Barry as a fellow prisoner, aiming to establish a friendly relationship with him, which will hopefully lead to receiving a confession from him. A special spy was chosen for this dangerous mission because he was able to withstand the psychological pressure that the mission would cause. He was supposed to listen to Barry confess about the brutal treatment of Sion. But ultimately, this mission did not result in a confession. Meanwhile, Barry remained agitated and was desperately trying to escape punishment. During one meeting with his wife, Valmay, he subtly suggested that she should end her life before the trial to avoid testifying against him. He implied that if she chose not to, she would face serious consequences according to state law. Barry communicated with his wife very cautiously, carefully choosing his words to prevent the authorities from using their phone conversations against him. Fortunately, Valmay did not listen to Barry, which ultimately saved her life. When Barry and Valmay arrived at court, around 200 people were present, ready to confront the brutal murderers. During the trial, Valmay testified against her husband, Barry, portraying him as a true monster. She tried to defend herself by claiming she was coerced into the horrific acts. However, there was strong evidence suggesting she participated willingly. On October 20, 1988, the jury began deliberating on the verdict. After 3 hours, the jurors found the defendants Barry and Valmay guilty. Valmay Beck received a sentence of 10 years for kidnapping and life in prison for murder. However, due to her cooperation with the prosecution, she was granted the possibility of temporary release. The jury spent 6 hours discussing Barry's sentence. Finally, Barry Watts was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His case was officially archived, meaning he would not be eligible for release. However, the story of Barry and Valmay didn't end in prison. Barry started bragging about his crimes and told a cellmate that he had committed a similar offense. He mentioned the murder of 31-year-old teacher, Helen Marie Fenney, who went missing on October 29 of that year. Investigators later discovered that Valmay was also involved in this incident. Valmay admitted to witnessing her husband murder the teacher Helen, after which they placed her body in the trunk of their car and disposed of it in a landfill near Brisbane. Barry remained silent during police questioning, refusing to provide any information about the second victim, Helen. He seemed to hope to challenge the verdict in Sion's case in the future. However, in 2007, he confessed to murdering Sion and detailing the crime. Valmay endured assaults while in her cell, suffering regular beatings, including a severe head injury from a tin can. To ensure her safety, she was transferred to a more secure correctional facility. During her time there, she converted to Christianity and started to make positive changes in her life. Valmay applied for parole 3 times but was denied each time. In 2007, she divorced her husband, Barry. She also struggled with serious health issues, such as obesity and diabetes. In 2008, her health declined significantly, leading doctors to place her in an induced coma immediately after heart surgery. The police hoped that while she was on her deathbed, she would confess to additional crimes that she and Barry was suspected of, including numerous kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 64 without regaining consciousness, taking with her all the secrets of their horrific crimes.